Okay, we're
Okay.
ready.
Good, then. Francine, you want to read the opening statement, please? You're muted.
Okay. So-
I'm okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Call to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10(4)-10, and regulations governing remote meetings, new NJAC 539-1.5. I hereby declare this meeting of the Holmdel Township Zoning Board to be open and announce that adequate and electronic notice of this meeting was provided in a notice dated January 19, 2022. Notices were sent to the Asbury Park Press, Two River Times, and posted on the bulletin board and on the main access door to Town Hall. Notices were filed in the clerk's office and posted on the township's website at www.holmdeltownship.com. This meeting is being conducted on a remote electronic basis using Zoom with live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, and will be archived on the township's YouTube and Facebook pages. As such, recordings of a public meeting are public records subject to the Open Public Records Act. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions or provide comments once the meeting is open to the public. At that time, you will need to use the raise your hand feature on the bottom of the screen, and you will be invited into the meeting by the chairperson one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and asked to provide your name and address for the record. You may also dial *9 if accessing this meeting by telephone.
Roll call.
Ms. Averin, Dr. Blumenthal,
Here.
Mr. Burkle,
Present.
Ms. Campus,
Here.
Dr. Latif,
Here.
Mr. Luciani,
Here.
Mr. Orphanatopoulos,
Present.
Ms. Perez,
Here.
and Dr. Shaw. Okay, Ralph, would you like to seat Jill Perez for Valerie this evening?
Yes, for all matters on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Then please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Stay standing for a moment of silence. Honor the police and military who've been wounded or killed in action, and also all of our first responders. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
The
the
United
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our main item of business for tonight is a continued public hearing. Item 1, Francine.
470 Red Hill Road, Dementia Center, preliminary final site plan number 2020-6, block 49.02, lots 40, 40Q, and 41 in the R40B zone. Applicant seeks a use variance to create an assisted living residence, which will be a facility for those suffering from dementia for 105 residents. The facility will consist of a state-of-the-art residential memory support program that will house a variety of innovative programs and building design concepts, including an assessment program, educational services, and an extensive community outreach and support.
Okay, excuse me, Loretta, can you please send the link? to
I just
Laura
sent it.
Shaw?
I sent it, Ralph. I sent it.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Jason.
Got an email from him.
I
Good.
just read off.
Okay, then let me reiterate one thing that Francine indicated. This is a formal public hearing on this application. The applicant will provide testimony. The board has the opportunity to interact with and question the applicant. Only at certain times after that happens will the public be provided an opportunity to question or comment. After some testimony is given, there may be an opportunity for public questioning. Comments in general about the application only come at the end of the hearing process, which may or may not be tonight. When it returned to our attorney, Marty, and also, first of all, Loretta, has appropriate notice been given of this hearing?
Yes, it has.
Is the escrow in order at this time?
Yes.
Marty, there are some other attorneys here. Do you want to
Yes.
mention?
So I noticed somebody has their hand up, counsel from Middletown. I have not received any letter, but he indicates Brian Clancy, special counsel from Middletown. And I do know that Mr. Asadi, I thought I saw his name as a attendee, and I assume as a courtesy to him, we should, let him give his, I'm assuming he wants to put an objection or at least a statement on the record. So I think that's a courtesy. We need to let him do that now.
Would you like me to let the two attorneys in right now?
Well, I don't know if Mr. Dasty has anything to say, but I guess we could ask him, but I haven't received anything. But I know Mr. Asadi did send us a letter.
Okay, Kevin Asadi, I see, is in the attendee, so
Yeah.
should we let them both in at this point?
I would we can let them both in and ask Mr. Dasty if he had any initial comment he wanted to make. Otherwise, definitely Mr. Asadi as a courtesy, because we don't need to make him wait until
Okay,
it's
so
public.
All right, so just give me 1 second. Let's see. There's a lot of people on here. Here's Kevin.
It's Kevin Asadi.
I
and
have Kevin.
Brian Clancy.
Yeah, Brian.
Loretta, I can promote Brian.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Kevin was there, he disappeared.
I see Kevin and I see Brian.
Okay.
Okay, you want?
Kevin, I assume
Preliminaries,
you,
Marty?
Kevin, I assume you want to make an initial comment
I don't see Kevin.
Yes, thank you.
based on your letter?
Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
don't see you. Oh, there you are. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Loretta. I'm right next to you in my Brady Bunch scenario here. Good evening, everybody. Kevin Asadi of Zager Fuchs. I represent an organization called Potter's Farm Preservation. This organization assembled in the last week or so. They mainly make up several residents of Country Woods, and they wanted to have their own representation to represent, their own interests. I submitted a letter to the board, and ever since I was retained to get involved in this, as you can imagine, there were a lot of materials, transcripts, and other things for me to catch up on with respect to this project. And as I was doing so, I felt concerned about the fact that these other uses that are associated with this project are being treated as accessory uses. And I don't believe they can be viewed as accessory uses. So I did submit a letter outlining my position on that. I don't know if this is the time for us to get into a deep discussion about it, but if you'd like, I can. But at this moment, that's, my only concern. That's all I want to say up front.
My suggestion, Kevin, just for the record, two things. First of all, can you identify your clients so we have their names, or submit a letter with their names?
Sure, and I can identify them now. The people associated with this organization are Debbie Daly, that's Daly, Gaurav Baveja, which is the other Gaurav in the room,
Just spell the last name.
Baveja, Brian Robbins, and Christine Harry, Hay.
Thank you. And you said they're all Country Woods residents, or?
Yes, they are all residents of Country
Okay.
Woods.
Are those the only people that you represent?
Yes, sir.
The other thing I would say, I would suggest, subject to the board, that, again, you outlined in your letter and what you just said about your one objection of the uses. For the purposes of preserving your record, which you indicated to me you want to do, I would suggest you give a quick summary of your objection and then allow Mr. Brown to give his comments and rebuttal to that, and then allow the board to decide whether they want to move forward as present or in some other fashion. So I think we need to get this out of the way now and not let it linger.
Very well. So when we think about principal uses versus accessory uses, we're talking about, let's focus on what an accessory use is. And the case law talks about accessory uses being those uses that are customarily incidental to the principal use. So for example, in this application, there was some testimony that there's going to be a shed, and in that shed will be some, lawn care equipment. That's an accessory use, right? A restaurant is not an accessory use to an assisted living facility. A theater is not an accessory use to an assisted living facility. There's case law that I think supports the notion, and I think just common sense supports the notion. We have, from the applicant's own characterization of the project, there's nothing like this in the United States. They had to go all the way to Amsterdam to find an example of a facility like this that contains this town center concept. So it's certainly not customary to have a restaurant, a medical clinic, a salon, what else do we have? An auditorium, a theater. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say this is a first of its kind, and also it's very customary. It's certainly not. Some of the testimony that I was very struck by was from Ms. Jacks at one of the prior meetings, where she talks about, and I'm reading from the transcript of October 20th, she says about the restaurant, it's a bistro and it's meant to be for the people who live there and their families and visitors. But also, if the community comes in for, say, a performance, the bistro may be open at that time as well. So this isn't incidental to the assisted living concept. This is a separate principal use. And I'm not saying it's bad, right? It's a pretty cool concept. And I understand why they went to Amsterdam so many times and received consultation from the leaders at that facility to do something like this. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and we don't have to cast that kind of judgment on it. But what is important is that we look at these uses through the proper lens under the municipal land use law. And that's all I'm asking the board to do.
Sandy, you're representing United Methodist Communities, the applicants. Would you care to address or comment on these questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Blumenthal, and good evening, everybody. Good evening to the new board members and the returning board members. Thank you for your service to the community. Mr. Asadi, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting before, but it's good to see you on your screen there. I respectfully have a fundamental difference of opinion, not surprising, with Mr. Asadi. And I can quickly outline it. I received this letter late last night. So as you imagine, I haven't had much time to take a look at it, but I'm happy to respond based on the time that I've been provided. So Mr. Asadi's letter, which is dated yesterday, refers to two cases, and he's talking about in his letter how a car wash was not related enough to the principal use, and he emphasizes definitions should be based on ordinary meaning. So that's what I have to go on in terms of his legal brief. I have a fundamental difference of opinion on the interpretation of this. The facts are very different to start with. And in terms of the relationship, if you, for those of you who are new, you will be hearing testimony tonight to, in essence, bring you up to speed on what was testified to in monthly meetings from September through December. We're going to start with Larry Carlson, and he's going to reiterate the differences between what Mr. Asadi is trying to represent, and what's been said before and what can be reemphasized tonight and later on if needed. So let's look at Mr. Asadi's argument in terms of what we have been discussing for 6 months now since the proceedings started. Now, under the ordinance that we're dealing with, well, let me just read to you what assisted living says. And assisted living, by the way, is a licensure, which I can explain a little bit more. It says under your own definition section, assisted living residence shall mean a facility which is licensed by the Department of Health to provide apartment-style housing and congregate dining, and to assure that assisted living services are available when needed. And then it describes, the apartment kind of structure that you've heard about from our architect and also generally by Mr. Carlson. It specifically says that assisted living residences may include dementia/memory care facilities designed to meet the specific needs of persons with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. If there was any question about how the proposed facility fits into the mold of an assisted living facility, it has been resolved by operation of state agencies. As you heard testify in September by Mr. Carlson, and as was reiterated by at least one other, if not more, witnesses, the United Methodist Homes applied for what you heard before is called a certificate of need. And in fact, the first exhibit, A1 from the September hearing, and more specifically, exhibit A of exhibit A1, is in fact the declaration by the state of New Jersey that the proposed facility constitutes an assisted living residence, just like your ordinance refers to. In the context of that decision, United Methodist Communities forwarded to the New Jersey Department of Health not only narratives, which are extremely similar to the narrative that is part of A1, but also conceptual plans, which shows the unique nature of this facility, which is the fact that it is set up as a village. And yet it has the same functions of dementia centers throughout the United States. There's nothing wrong with getting better. There's nothing wrong with making things cutting edge. It doesn't mean that it comes under the a different definition. There is no other definition. And the state has resolved that, and from our point of view, and I think from a neutral point of view, definitively. So there's no question that this proposal, which you heard a lot about last year, for those who were there, and those of you who have read the transcript or watched it in a live stream fashion, that what has been proposed, which has always included a town center and has always included a pavilion in the middle of the village, is in fact what is an assisted living residence. The key here is not whether or not there is a separate building or two which has these facilities. It's whether or not it's inherently beneficial. And we will have more testimony than we did last year to clarify this based on the law and planning. We mentioned last year that Jim Higgins will testify, and he's still available to testify after we update you and bring in a few more facts. But from a common sense point of view, as Mr. Asadi says, there is no difference in terms of the functionality to the related services. Just think of where you go in your community to visit those who are elderly, and even those who have dementia, who live in those same places with people their age who have some challenges or not. You know, we call them in the field CCRCs, which are continuing care retirement communities, of which the Methodist Communities owns and operates some. We have had you hear last year from Mr. Carlson and others that in our facilities, we have dementia care facilities. They're part of CCRCs. There's no difference between offering services like food services and the like outside the wing of a dementia center or assisted living center in our facilities or facilities around the state. I'm sitting here in Neptune, New Jersey at the headquarters of the United Methodist Communities. If I went down the street to Seabrook and I went in there, which I've done because I've had family members there, and I went in and visited my elderly and ailing friends, clients. If we wanted to eat, we would go down to the cafeteria. It's not open to the public. It doesn't sell anything. But if I want to share a meal with my loved one, I will go down there and I'll have a meal. It's no different in terms of that functionality, that concept that we're offering. The fact that it's a village type of dementia center is what we're talking about, but that doesn't change the concepts. And certainly the uses that we testified to last year and we'll testify to tonight doesn't distinguish that. And just to be clear, we have always said, as we said in the application, and as Mr. Asadi noted, it's not a restaurant. You know, I see that on the website for this brand new group, they're saying, come out because it's a restaurant. It's not a restaurant, it's a bistro. There's a different concept. There's a reason why we call it a bistro. It's a bistro because residents who are living in the village and want to have the feeling, the sense that they're part of the community, they can go by themselves and they can eat a meal at the bistro. If they have friends or relatives, they can bring their friends or relatives and they eat in the bistro. There was a talk about a shopping center. This is not an Acme or a food town. It's a small center, as was testified to at some length in 2021. It is set up so that these folks with dementia feel like they are alive. They can go like they used to when they lived in their communities elsewhere. They can go in and buy food. They don't pay for anything. It is only for the residents. Likewise, there's an argument that we shouldn't have an amphitheater. You think of any assisted living facility or a CCRC that you go into to see your friends. You ever see an amphitheater? Of course you do. It's part of the related services to care for the people that we love. And in this case, people with dementia. And we've heard testimony about how it's intricately involved. You know, we can amplify again tonight for you know, bringing the new members up to speed and to reiterate how this is all related. But I think that really is definitive, and that could be the end of the story. However, we lawyers know that we like to cover bases. So let me just quickly say that there are other arguments. This is the 6th month since this hearing has started. I thank all you board members who have been here since September. And I also thank all you board members who are just starting out. But there's a concept in law, which as Mr. Flieger knows, Mr. Sadi knows, it's called laches, waiver, or the like. Now, I'm relieved in a way because it makes my argument much easier, I think, to hear Mr. Asadi say that he represents exactly the people who used to be with the HOA. And I have to give you some bridging information on this because you read it in your transcripts. So in September of 2021, at least the spouse of one of the two top leaders of the HOA showed up. She and the other representative of the HOA showed up, and they said that they basically were going to object. In October, they brought in an attorney representing that same group, a very, very smart attorney too. So Mr. Gazarowski made comments during those times, and he didn't make any comment along these lines. He should have, if he thought that there was any legitimacy of this. And if he missed it, then he still should have thought about it enough to bring it up. Now, I would also point out that based on the case cited, it's a legal decision. It's not one that in that case is done by a jury. I would submit that your planner has already determined that this is one use. And she may be asked tonight, but Ms. Keller indicated in her September 16, 2021, and in November 30, 2021, that it's one variance. It's one use variance, I should say. And that is the case. It's a case then, and it's the case now. So Mr. Gazarovski made no mention of this in anything in writing or anything verbally before any board. So for a new council, for at least part of that same HOA membership to now bring it up is just too late. It's not fair. It's not fair for all these folks have been here for 6 months. It's not fair for the applicant. And besides, as I said in the beginning, it's also not on point. I could go on, but I would suggest that's enough to resolve the issue. Mr. Flieger, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, let me ask you one question to clarify one point with regard to, and I think you made it very clear tonight that the various facilities within the center are all in support of the residents who live there.
Yes, absolutely.
And that we certainly heard testimony, and it certainly, I'm aware of it as a human being here, that human contact is crucially important for all of these people, and that there are no limit to visiting hours. Friends and family are very much encouraged to visit and to support the residents.
They are. It's all part of the therapy and the
Right.
humane relationship that the homes wants to have with their residents there. Yes.
Now, one point of clarification in that regard, and I think you said it quite clearly tonight, but I want to emphasize it, that the facilities are for the residents. It's not for someone who, of the public, who happens to drive by and is looking for a hamburger or anything else, to walk in and come in to have a meal or a show or anything else.
That's absolutely correct. And Mr. Carlson, who will be testifying next, he'll say it again. Yes, sir.
Okay, since Kate, you were referred to in your, do you have any comments on this question at this point?
Sure, just a couple brief things. Thank you, Chairman Blumenthal, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for giving your rebuttal. Yeah, I think that, the way that our letters were written, I think that Mr. Brown did say clearly that we have treated this as one use from the beginning. This applicant came in with an assisted living type use focused on dementia care with accessory uses that were subordinate to their use. And I think that, there's two things to look at here from my perspective. One is that they can put on testimony talking about how these uses are subordinate, which I think that they have in previous hearings, because of its kind of a unique nature. For example, they have a grocery store, they have things labeled as a theater, which you may not see on every single type of assisted living, but I think their testimony has shown that it will function in the same way as a dining area would otherwise in an assisted living facility. The other thing is that, I think that the specific nature of this particular facility aside is that a lot of these items are very common in assisted living facilities. And that's just in my professional experience over the last 15 years. These facilities have changed over time, and you do not really see one that comes through that does not have, things like a personal service salon or like a theater or an amphitheater, things of that nature. So, we've always taken the position that it was just one use. And the last thing I would just say, and this is mostly for the board's instruction, is that because this is a D1 variance, it's up to the applicant to put their testimony on and, say what they propose to do. And the board has the ability to offer mitigations or to offer conditions to an approval if that's the direction that they chose to go in. So for example, the board could specify that nothing could be open to the public, et cetera, even though that's not, the applicant has said that that's the case. But I think that because it is a D variance, there is more flexibility there on both sides for both the applicant and the board. So yeah, I would just say that, we stand by our decision from the beginning, which is that this is one single use that's requesting a D1 variance.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that certainly took my understanding of occasionally when I visited one of these kinds of places, that there certainly are facilities that support the residents. The doctor's office, doctors will come in and the like, all of that kind of stuff. So Marty, from our point of view, I think we've heard Mr. Asadi's concerns, and he will potentially have an opportunity to comment further later as we go through the testimony. But I feel we should move on in the direction that we've been heading to consider this application as a single-use variance application.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to Mr. Asadi, I think the board should confirm that if they're willing to move forward as a single use, based on what Kate indicated. I do agree with Kate. Mr. Asadi's at least comments are on the record, so he's at least preserved his objection. Mr. Brown has put his rebuttal thoughts on. He preserved his objection without getting into the legality of any of the legal arguments from the factual arguments. I think this board can, and Kate's comments, make a determination. This is one use, and all those other uses are ancillary to, in fact, accessory to the main use. But I think we probably should do a quicker straw vote of the board to confirm we're prepared to move forward.
Yeah.
Based on that.
But this is not any final decision on the granting of such a use variance.
That's right. Just to proceed forward as a one use. All the uses are one use and not two or more multiple uses, which may require another use variance.
Okay, that's certainly, I would support that. Let's do Dimitri.
I heard everything that everybody said, and the key thing, in my opinion, is that this is not open to the general public. The quote that Mr. Hasid had said, I remember hearing something about that myself, and that's what I was questioning. But as long as if we get to that point where we could put a condition that none of these facilities are open to the general public, then I would be okay with keeping this as a one use.
Okay, I have a quick question related to that. If we decide that there's a condition that it's not open to the public, how will that be regulated to make sure somebody's not driving into the memory center who has nobody in the memory center or any relationship to it and going to the amphitheater or the bistro? How can we control, we can put conditions, but if those conditions can't be regulated, then there really is no use to a condition.
Sorry.
Well, I was saying,
Yeah.
Sandy, could you comment briefly on how you intend to manage the coming and going from the facility?
Well, this is like any other assisted living building, and Mr. Carlson can talk about his experience over the many decades about assisted living facilities around the state. I'm not aware of any assisted living facility, or for that matter, a senior care facility, where there's a set restriction. It's a function of the state licensure, and I would suggest that in this particular case, there's no need for something like this. But I'll give you a different example. We've already talked about different specific restrictions. We've agreed to a landscape deed restriction, and we've agreed to not open up the lane. I mean, those are very specific, and those are enforceable. Those make sense. That's my point.
You provided testimony that this is a gated complex?
Yes.
Everyone has to enter through a gate where there'll be some kind of a person or security or whatever kind of position there is?
Yes, sir.
People who enter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Francine, does that satisfy you for the moment?
For the moment, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have not reached the end of this process. We're not, just a question for the understanding that we going forward, considering this to be a single use.
And I'll just to confirm also, and as the testimony goes forward, how you want to make that condition, if you even want to do. I mean, Last night, the planning board approved Brightview, which is a continuing care facility. And Kate's aware, she was the planner. I was there last night. I mean, it's similar facilities. It's all in one large building with different wings, but there's no restrictions on. There's no restrictions on it. I mean, I don't know who's going to go there and try to get into the cafeteria if you're not visiting a patient. But having said that, all the ones at Holmdel, I'm not aware of any conditions on access, other than I don't know who would ever go there unless you're going to visit someone.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify, because I was the one who did just bring that up. Yeah, I think I agree that, I may have misspoke when I suggested something like not open to the general public, because anyone can visit, anyone can do that. But to me, it's more about, just the clarity that this would not be, that the applicant would agree that this would not be a restaurant that is marketed as a public space.
I would agree.
Yes,
Of that nature
that's
is more
something
what I'm talking about.
we'll stipulate to that. I mean,
Yes.
that is fine.
Yes, that's more of what I was speaking about,
Sure.
come down for happy hour at the, dementia center, but, just things of that nature where just so that the board, whomever, it would get to a point where they're comfortable knowing that, just basically just so that the operations would not be different than what has been stipulated on the record by the applicant. So, thank you.
Excuse me, Ralph. I
Yep.
think Mr. Asadi's hand is up. Kevin?
He's in the meeting still?
Yeah, he's here.
I don't see him.
May I speak?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I have a question.
It's not a question, but there's a lot being said that I just wish to give a reply to, if that's okay.
Okay.
Well, why don't we, let us finish surveying the board members, and then we'll give you a chance to respond if you wish, please. Jason?
Mr. Brown added some argument that during the course of the deliberation just now, and I would wish to respond to it.
Well, let's just finish our straw vote, so to speak. Jason?
One thing came up, the condition about opening the lane. I just wanted to understand a little bit more. What are the conditions that are currently in this proposal?
They've agreed not to put a deed restriction, so there's never access to the Country Woods. I think it's Country View Drive, whatever that one street is. It's a T street that actually tees right up to the property line to the north. And there was some concern with the residents that might be opened up for some kind of access, and obviously the applicant has agreed. There's no intention, and agreed to deed restrict against that.
Okay.
And Marty, just to be overly technical, we
It would be
also clarified that since the township is involved with that, it would be conditioned upon the township agreeing to that. But yes, absolutely.
Right.
So it would not be possible under this variance.
That's right. This variance would not give them that at all. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so are you content with going ahead as treating it as one use, Jason?
Yes, I am.
Irfan? You're muted.
Sorry, I was in mute. So based on the definition that Mr. Brown gave for assisted living, which includes congregated dining, and Kate's comment that it is an accessory use as part of that, I think we can go ahead as a single use as described.
Gene?
Yes.
I'm just seeing you in the order of happen to see you on the screen here, so you're okay with this?
Yes, sure.
Okay, Jill?
This would be my first vote, and I, have the information. I've been listening, but am I able to abstain at this point?
Well, yeah, first of all, you are seated for Valerie, so you are able to participate. Before a final vote, all of you new folks will have to certify that you listened to all the transcripts or read the tapes of the prior meetings. For a discussion like we're holding now, everybody, and I'll get the score off in a moment, is certainly part of the board, and we invite you to participate in the discussion. So
to answer your question, if you don't feel like you're able to, you may abstain. It's just a straw vote, though.
Okay. I mean, I would feel more comfortable abstaining right now.
Okay. Gaurav,
I'm
you're
really,
not seated, but nevertheless, so we'd like to include everyone and get their thoughts out on the table so we can all consider it.
sure. As of now, I'll go with Jill. I'm still learning about the situation, so I'll abstain for the time being. So
Fine, that's okay. So I guess the sense clearly is that we will proceed as this is one use. Mr. Asadi, you had a further comment?
Sure, thank you. A couple things. One, I think a lot of weight is being given to this certificate of need. And even in this, throughout the proceeding, and even in this argument that we're having right now, weight was being given to this certificate of need. The certificate of need, which is issued by a New Jersey state regulatory agency, it does not supersede your authority as a zoning board. In fact, I'll read from it. This is from the certificate of need, Exhibit A1. It says, this approval is not intended to preempt in any way the authority of any municipality to regulate land use within its borders and shall not be used by the applicant to represent that the department has made any findings or determination relative to the use of any specific property. And that's exactly what they just did. He just held up his certificate of need and said, well, looky here, we have this, which means they looked at this and they said that we're right about this issue. And that is not what this certificate.
Mr. Asadi, in fairness, Mr. Brown did reference that, but the board in this discussion just now just really focused on the public access issue. I don't think there was any comment from a board member about the certificate of need or the state's approval.
I understand.
So I disagree with that comment, and I'm not sure. I mean, you've preserved your objection, obviously, by making it. I don't know where we're going if we're going to start arguing over the certificate of need at this point.
That's fine, but I think it needed to be said because over the last 48 hours, I've read a lot of transcript and the certificate of need is being given a lot of weight, which it does not deserve. The other thing I want to state is that, again, over the last 48 hours, I've taken in the entire proceeding thus far. And all we've heard from, not from Mr. Brown only, but all of his witnesses is that this is a one-of-a-kind concept because we have a restaurant, we have a grocery store, we have a salon and a theater, it's a village, we have a town center. We have all these things that exist nowhere but in Amsterdam in one facility, and we're trying to bring it here. And he gave you a lot of information about why it's nice. And I don't disagree that it's nice. It's nice. Okay. It's not, I'm not saying it's bad. And your decisions on this is not a decision of whether it's good or bad. The only argument I'm making right now is what is the proper scope of review for these uses under the municipal land use law. And for all of these months, we've been hearing this is one of a kind, doesn't exist anywhere. But just now you heard from the attorney, oh, this is normal for every assisted living has these things. Well, how do we reconcile that? So we have to, take the testimony that you've spent so much time listening to. You've got to take that at face value, and you've listened to them. And now when it's inconvenient, now all of a sudden, this is an ordinary assisted living facility. There's nothing special about it. So that's all I wanted to say. You've made your decision. I won't belabor it. And I don't do that, I promise you. So that's all I'll say about it.
Okay, in fairness, Ralph, I think we should probably check with the other council.
Correct. I was going to head there first, but Sandy had his hand up. I don't know if you wanted just to make any final brief comment.
I just have to say, one, the certificate of need, I've seen it many, many times. You do have the absolute right under that certificate of need to review the regular standards under municipal land use law and some cases the fair housing law. And as Ms. Keller indicated, there are relevant issues. That's why we've been here with you. We're not saying that because there was a certificate of need issued that we don't have to go through all this process. We've been doing it for 6 months. If we thought that was the end all, we wouldn't be spending all this time. You can look at everything Ms. Keller looks at in terms of this, and here's the key. Is this proposed facility inherently beneficial? Our argument is absolutely. We can provide you case law showing that. And the particular concept was approved. Now, and if Mr. Asadi is trying to say that we're reversing our testimony, not true at all. It is unique. It is progressive. It is a wonderful new thing dealing with the concept of a village. But the functionality, the related services, as we've gone into, it's the same. Yes, it has a bistro. Yes, it has an auditorium. Yes, it has medical facilities. Yes, it is like an assisted living. And Mr. Carlson can get into that a little bit more. We are absolutely consistent with our approach as we have been in 6 months. We're not saying anything different, but in terms of his argument that it's a separate use, no, we totally disagree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Marty, do you want to bring Mr. Clancy? So
Excuse me, Ralph, Jill, do you have your hand up to say something?
I do, because I did hear Seabrook referenced, and just in terms of scope, Seabrook is a massive community. How does this compare in terms of, that as your example, traffic flow and everything?
Well, traffic flow is arguably completely different. Like all assisted living facilities have differences. And Mr. Carlson can get into it based on his decades of experience on commonality. I used it because it's the closest one to where I'm sitting here now. It is a huge facility, and ours is not huge. Ours only has 105, and Seabrook has thousands. However, and Mr. Carlson can get into it, the fact that they have 10 or 20 times more doesn't differ from what the chairman was talking about. Yes, they have a common facilities for eating. That's part of the grant of an assisted living licensure. That's the commonality.
And Joe, those are all great questions when they're live witnesses to question them and give comparisons and give you examples so you can relate to what this is compared to other facilities. Obviously the attorney's not a witness, but he's just kind of summarizing what you're going to hear and what was said previously for the transcript.
Yeah, Mr. Carlson's president of the United Methodist Communities, and he has testified before, and I take it he'll be coming back shortly so we can ask these questions of him. Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Well, Marty and Brian Clancy.
Yep. Brian.
Good evening. My name is Brian Clancy. I'm an attorney with Dasty and Associates. We're special counsel for Middletown Township. We did send a letter of representation into the board today, but we were just recently brought on to this matter on behalf of Middletown. And I understand if you haven't received that yet, so my apologies. Much like Mr. Asadi, we spent the last day or so playing a little catch up. Thankfully, having videos on YouTube accessible makes it a lot easier for us. So we appreciate that. And Middletown's position on this is, much like what's been said already in these previous sessions on all sides, that, everybody wants to be a good neighbor. So, Middletown is a neighboring community. If you look out the front of the proposed facility, you're looking at Middletown. When you come off that Parkway ramp, you're in Middletown. The properties across the street are Middletown. So obviously Middletown's concern is the impact of a non-conforming use on their community. And in that regard, there's an impact on traffic potentially with the change in the development there. Some of these remarkable facilities that are going in there are certainly going to require delivery of goods and services, increased truck traffic on the roads, which certainly will impact the Middletown neighborhoods there. In addition to that, a lot of time has been spent talking about emergency services and access. There are shared services between these communities in regards to EMS and fire services. Certainly, if something were to happen on a neighboring property, it's not uncommon in a town like Holmdel to have neighboring communities provide shared services, come in when ambulances are tied up to help respond, maybe not to that facility, but if that facility is tying up local resources, we'll be bringing in units from outside of town, potentially impacting Middletown's ability to provide services to their town as well. You know, and then there's the pure aesthetics of this. You come off the Parkway in Middletown, and right now you're looking at a farm, which has also been plenty of testimony about, and the nature of that. And I know that the board has had the ability to do a site visit, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Coming off the Parkway and seeing a facility with buildings there is much different than what you're coming off. So and seeing nowadays. So certainly the aesthetics is a concern. You know, and the impact of having just a non-conforming development in the area. So this is a use variance. This is not a permitted use. This is not never been envisioned as a use for this property. And the same can be said for the properties across the street in Middletown, which are zoned for medium density single family residents and low density single family residents. Assisted living facilities are permitted in Middletown, but they're specifically excluded from those properties across the street in their zoning scheme. So and we're literally talking about across the street. So certainly Middletown has some concerns. I don't have any formal objection or brief to submit now. I'm kind of glad to be coming in at this point because I understand there's going to be some catch up. There's some new board members here. So I'm looking forward to listening to the catch up part, and we'll certainly benefit from that. But I appreciate you letting us participate.
Thank you. And certainly as Holmdel resident has often enough been in Middletown, we know you're just across the street. I personally feel it's important for all of us to be good neighbors to each other and to support each other. So I welcome your listening, and as we go through the process, if there are issues that come up later on, please raise your hand and we'll at the appropriate time permit questioning and comments. Okay, with that, I think we've gotten past. Sandy?
Yeah, I think Mr. Blumenthal, you're going to look to me to start testimony. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. You beat me
Okay.
by
Well,
half a second.
I just wanted to have an aside before we start. I appreciate Mr. Clancy being here. I can assure you we hope to be good neighbors. But I wanted to emphasize, especially to our new board members, that Mr. Clancy, just as all of us attorneys, we're not giving evidence. And I have to say that having been a board attorney for decades, I don't think I've ever heard so many comments in the beginning of an action by an objecting attorney than I have tonight. I'm sure that Mr. Flegel will point out to the board that what Mr. Clancy is saying now is not evidence. And if he wants to point out some of the facts he's referring to, then he needs to bring in witnesses. He certainly does have the ability, after hearing all the testimony, to make legal arguments based on the facts. And I must say that I hope that everybody would agree who was there. What I've been saying is based on actual testimony that was put in by our witnesses in the last 6 months. And with that, I'm ready to proceed.
Hey, Ralph, before we start, I'm just curious as to what order of events. Are we going to have our Bob go over his letter, or is that going to be later on, or what's going to happen tonight?
I believe, my understanding is that Mr. Brown is going to have some of the previous witnesses and testimony to review some of the past testimony. They are going to update some of that testimony because they have had some change in thoughts about how some of the layout is done. They will introduce that. We will probably run out of time. And I anticipate that, assuming that occurs, that there will be further engineering testimony on engineering and planning that will continue on another evening.
Yes,
Well,
that's correct,
Brett-
Mr. Blumenthal. I could give you more of a summary if you want collectively, but we spent a fair amount of time already. It's 8 o'clock and I'm ready to forget any introduction I thought I might give and go right to Mr. Carlson.
Okay. So
All right,
go ahead.
all right. Again, I'm in United Methodist Communities headquarters. It's their state headquarters in Neptune. Hopefully you can see Mr. Carlson here now. And I also have Hal Simoff here. And we have a couple of other folks who may testify tonight. If we get to them, I don't know how far we'll get. But without further ado, of course, at the September hearing, Mr. Carlson was sworn in and he was allowed to be an expert. So I asked the chair and Mr. Flieger if you want him and others to be re-sworn in now, or you want to go over their credentials again, if you want to accept them, or whatever you're comfortable with.
They have been sworn, as have our professionals, unless the board sees the need. I don't see a need to re-swear anyone in.
I would
And will
suggest briefly just indicate what Mr. Carlson's position is, or brief, background, and let's get on.
All right, here's Mr. Carlson.
Good evening. My name is Larry Carlson, and I'm the president and CEO of United Methodist Communities. And thank you for the opportunity to present our project to you tonight. United Methodist Communities is a faith-based, not-for-profit organization founded over 100 years ago in Monmouth County to provide housing and services for New Jersey seniors. Today, UMC operates 9 senior living communities and a home health agency. Although Methodist in name, we serve people of all faiths and backgrounds. Our comprehensive care facilities provide skilled nursing, assisted living, memory support, and independent living. The parent corporation is governed by an 18-member volunteer board of directors from the wider New Jersey community. UMC employs just over 1,000 people and serves 1,800 seniors across the state. Day-to-day operations is led by me as the president and CEO, and by an executive team, which includes Cindy Jakes, the vice president of housing and community initiatives. And Cindy has been a key leader in creating the programming of this project. For decades, the blueprint for memory care has been viewed through the clinical lens and placed inside an institutional setting. Though perhaps well-intentioned, the combination of a generalized approach and facility setting creates a palpable angst amongst our seniors and their families. And for them all, the decision comes at the end of a long journey that is seemingly taking far more than just memories. The UMC Board of Directors and leadership have determined that a major strategy for UMC's future is innovation and leadership in the provision of care for those living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. To that end, UMC has embarked on the creation of a Center of Excellence in Dementia Research, Diagnosis, Community Resource, and On-Site Supportive Living. I traveled to Amsterdam, Holland several years ago and visited a dementia village called De Hoekeweg. And I was inspired by the way this new way of providing dementia care and determined that UMC should bring this concept to the United States. After a year-long search for a suitable piece of land, UMC found the Potter Farm is the perfect place for our dementia village. The land is owned by UMC's subsidiary called the Enclave at Holmdel, which is also a 501c3 organization. The Enclave at Holmdel Dementia Village will be home for 105 residents. It'll be licensed as an assisted living community by the New Jersey Department of Health, following all of the regulations required as such. And just like any other assisted living community in New Jersey, the Enclave will have ancillary support facilities, such as a multi-purpose room or theater, a gift shop or grocery store, a coffee shop or bistro, and outdoor gardens, all within easy walking distance. A place where you can live with people who will be your friends within a family-scaled community setting. These ancillary support facilities are for the use of the residents, their families, and guests. They are not open to the general public. How would you like to spend the last years of your life? In a sterile hospital-like institution or in a residential village-like community? Dementia is a terrible disease, and currently there is no cure. It affects the brain, causing people to become very confused, anxious, depressed, and sometimes aggressive. Most end up in a traditional assisted living or nursing home setting. And I've worked in senior living for over 40 years, and what I have seen is that people who live in an institutional setting can be more confused because of their environment. Because what they see is a hospital-like environment with doctors, nurses, and other staff in uniform. They live in this institutional setting and they do not understand why they live there. They look and hope to go home again. And what happens in a traditional nursing or assisted living setting is just more confusion. We add confusion to confusion, and that is not what these people need. They want to have a life and help, our help, to deal with their dementia. They want to live in a normal house, not an institution. They want to live in a place where they can smell their dinner on the stove in the kitchen, or be free to go to the kitchen and grab something to eat or drink, or go out the front door and take a walk on a beautiful day. These simple pleasures are what they need and long for. And that is what we should provide for them. We should structure this like a home, so they do not have to live with a group of 15 or 20 or 30 in a nursing home or regular assisted living community. No, a small group of people, 6 or 7, family life, like living with friends. People with dementia want to live with others of similar values and experiences, living their own life in their own household. But there's more to life. People with dementia want fun in their life, and they want to experience a meaningful life. They need a social life just like we do, just like they did before dementia. They want to get out of the house and go do some shopping, or go to the theater or bistro, or share a meal with friends and family, or walk in the park and sit on the bench in the sun, hoping that some passerby will come by with a smile, or have a conversation about life, or about the goats in the field, or the butterflies in the garden. Social life is important. It means that we are part of society, that we belong, and it's what people need, even if a person is living with advanced dementia. The Enclave at Holmdel will be such a place. The Enclave will introduce a truly revolutionary life-forward model in the United States, one which will make Holmdel proud, one that focuses on quality of life and the creation of an environment that increases confidence and gives living momentum and purpose. Imagine all the things that make life worth living: a home, a family, a community, fulfilling days even as some of life's moments are lost. Centered around holistic well-being, the Enclave seeks to equip and educate families and communities while serving our aging population with dementia. The Enclave features state-of-the-art housing built within a secure boundaries of a complete community, which restores life's normal rhythms. Only at the Enclave can a parent have the choice of leaving the house, walking to the store, going to a church service, eating in a bistro, attending a meeting, or walking in the park. And only because of the Enclave can an adult child caregiver make the confident choice for their whole family to keep living the life they know and love. At the Enclave, we aren't simply building a new type of senior living. We are committing to boldly revesting life into living. And I would like to show a short video of the concept, what we're talking about. And the only difference that you will see is that the two-story house on the north and the town center, which is two-story, have been switched on the site plan that Mr. Simoff will be talking about later. And that the town center is now a one-story building to reduce the scale of the building to be even more residential than what it had.
All right. Our tech guru, who those of you who are on the board know Travis from the last 2021 hearings, he's saying that, Loretta, you need to allow us to screen share. And for purposes of exhibits, this particular exhibit, which is in the form of a thumb drive, is in the evidence box, so to speak. And Loretta, you can confirm that it's been previously marked. And I'd like to use this opportunity, when I just said marking, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to formally ask if there was any question about it, that all the exhibits that were put on the record, which Loretta has in front of her, that's A1 through A11, be considered to be in evidence.
These are new versions?
No, all the ones I just mentioned A1 through A11 were marked by Loretta, and they were all testified to between September and December 1, 2021.
So
And I'd
these
just
are
like
the
to form-
original plan.
Original exhibits.
Yes,
Fine.
that's right.
Yes, they carry forward.
So we're watching the same video we saw before?
Yes.
We are.
Okay.
Travis can share. Allison made him a co-host. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Well, since I saw this movie.
At United Methodist Communities, we have a bigger vision for dementia care that responds to these challenges. One that pushes the boundaries of what is possible for supporting older adults, their loved ones who share the journey with them, and the communities in which they live. United Methodist Communities is a nonprofit, faith-based organization that is driven by the mission to provide housing and support for older adults. We want to take the lessons learned from our 9 existing communities and our study of Hoykeve Dementia Village in the Netherlands to create a center of excellence that will change the way we care for older adults with dementia across the region and the entire country. The new model creates a full community with normal rhythms of leaving the house, walking to the grocery store on site, attending a meeting, walking in the park, and more. Located across the river from New York City, Holmdel is a beautiful rural community known for world-class innovation in a rural setting. The W.H. Potter & Son Farm is an agricultural site consisting of roughly 18 acres located immediately upon entering Holmdel from the on-off ramp of the Garden State Parkway. Surrounded by quiet residential neighborhoods, it represents the perfect setting for the model of care UMC is trying to create. Houses contain 7 residents each in order to replicate the size of a single-family home, providing a more normalized experience. Houses are autonomous, but grouped into neighborhoods of 3 to 4 houses each, which are physically connected into discrete buildings to comply with state regulations regarding staffing. All 4 buildings exit into the shared outdoor space. Central to the design are prominent spaces that can be personalized by residents, both at the individual and house level, to provide a level of ownership that is not possible in larger, institutional settings. The exteriors of the building are designed based on a modern farmhouse aesthetic that focuses on simple, clean detailing, which lends to support the project goals of creating a normal residential setting while still creating something that feels of its time and place. The interior design will be based on a kit of parts approach that allows for both consistency and variation across the 15 houses in order to make sure that each home feels unique while still creating a design that is efficient to construct and maintain. The Center of Excellence will be intentionally connected with resources of the greater community. The vision is a holistic approach to dementia living, not just focusing on physical safety, but whole person well-being. At United Methodist Communities, this verse is key to our faith-based mission. We believe that this new model of care is a crucial step forward in bringing abundant life to those affected by dementia through supporting caregivers, enriching life holistically, engaging individually, respecting the individual, maximizing the quality of life, utilizing technology, assisting with diagnosis, assessing for support needs, connecting with the community, and providing supportive housing.
So I want to be real clear about what we are proposing. This is an assisted living community licensed under the New Jersey Department of Health. The department has already approved and issued a certificate of need for this facility. The assisted living community will function just like all other assisted living facilities do within the state with support facilities. The difference is that they will not be in a one big box building, but built as a village-like residential scale, separate buildings within a secure perimeter. The enclave will be a unique cutting-edge type of community for the care of individuals with a dementia diagnosis, providing public good for the residents of Holmdel and the surrounding community. The residential setting is a better environment for those with dementia to live rather than in an institutional or a commercial setting. Actually, they have a fundamental right to live in a residential setting. This project is low impact, will not create any added traffic impact from the previous use, and there will be no additional noise from the community. You'll recall that the previous use at the exit from the Parkway exit ramp had daily traffic from not only the farm, but also the landscape business and the Potter Retail Equipment Center. The village will be safe for residents, staff, visitors, and neighbors. The secure village concept is the perfect way to allow freedom to the residents while at the same time assuring that they will be safe. The surrounding neighbors will be safe as well. UMC has always done its best to be good neighbors in all of our New Jersey communities that has operated going back 100 years. We've continued that covenant here by being responsive to many of the suggestions and requested changes this board has made. The project will be aesthetically pleasing and will be as discussed at the next hearing by our internationally known expert in the field of senior housing, David Ogle. This application should be approved once the testimony is complete. Thank you.
And that is the end of the president's testimony. Mr. Chairman.
Yes. You want to continue with your presentation?
Sure. We would now shift
Well,
gears.
just hold on before we jump. Let me just see if any of the board members have any questions about Mr. Carlson's testimony. Not seeing any, then go ahead.
Okay. We felt that a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. That's why we played that same video that those of you who were with us in September did. It was 6 minutes long. We're going to go into high gear now. We're not going to go back over the lengthy testimony that Hal Semoff provided. We're going to show you a new conceptual that was sent in under the 10-day rule for this hearing. And as Hal will point out to you, he'll tell you about all the changes that we've made and what the proposal is at this time. And likewise, Hal was sworn, of course, in 2021, initially at the October hearing. You also heard his credentials and you allowed him to testify as a professional engineer and also as a traffic engineer. What would be new tonight is that in 2021, Hal didn't get to his traffic testimony. He is here tonight based on a traffic study that was sent in under the 10-day rule to talk about that. And if there are no questions about Hal, we'll have him start.
Go ahead.
Oh, Loretta, could you allow us to screen share, please? UMC Board 1 and 2?
Travis is able to. Hold on.
It's our other name that's in there that has no name.
What is it
UMC
under?
Board?
Oh, the UMC Board 2. Allison?
Oh, I apologize. I had it under UMC. I'll do that
okay.
now.
No problem. No problem. Thanks.
Okay, Hal, well, they haven't seen you too much today, but a lot of people saw you a lot last year. So we've decided that having the screen up is going to be more effective, right?
Yes. So I'll give a quick discussion of the changes that we've made. As you can see, we're focusing on the 3 buildings that are adjacent to the parkway. And we, in further discussions and review of the operations, the town center has been reduced to 1 story. And then originally there were 2-story houses on either side. Logistically and operationally, the plan calls now for the 2 houses to be call it the east, going towards the road, so that in the scheme of things, the town center is the furthest from the road. Then the houses 1 and 2 next in line, and then 14 and 15 would be closest to Red Hill Road. There is a connector of the 2 with an elevator, and I might add that the elevator will be designed to accommodate a stretcher. And because houses 1 and 2 and 14 and 15 are proposed to be 2-story, as they were in the other plan, except they were on opposite sides of the town center. What we've also done is we took a look at the staffing, the exact staffing requirements and maximum operation of the site. And we found that the original plan called for 90 parking spaces. That now is being reduced to 80 parking spaces, so that the loading zone is the limit of the paved area, and we've removed about 1/4 acre of pavement by reducing the necessary parking. We also added 3 electric vehicle stations. That is now a new regulation, and so we now have a total of 80 spaces. And with the electric vehicle, we can count those as double spaces based on the new rules. So in reality, it's 80 physical spaces, but 83 credit spaces, call it. The other change that we made was we provided, maybe we go down closer to the road. We provided an emergency vehicle access that was requested.
Now, how that was testified to at the December 1st hearing, right?
Yes, and I've received confirmation from Detective Hernandez that this is an acceptable method of getting alternate access. And we plan also, which was in the December presentation, the emergency access roadway circulates the entire site.
If I could stop you there, what Hal is referring to is an email that was received by Hal today. We could put it up on the screen, but I think it's more difficult than not. We can add this to the record. It's a report. It is from Eric Hernando. I would suggest I can read it. It's to David Olson, copy to Hal Simoff. And again, it's dated today's date. I reviewed the last set of plans for the enclave, period. The plans include colon, the 20-foot wide emergency perimeter road, comma, the additional hydrant that I asked for, and updated locations for those hydrants, comma, 3 fire department access gate, and the secondary emergency access driveway, period. The changes are satisfactory, period. I would like to see the building plans to see if there is access to the structures from the outside and in parentheses, perimeter road. And that is the end of the transmission. So Hal, in relationship to what the fire chief was talking about, would you now show us what he approved?
Yeah, well, basically.
Can you back off on a little bit, so, especially for the new folks, so they can see the overall plan?
Should be the whole.
I might add that this was submitted as part of, we submitted 26.
We have a hard copy.
Yeah, a hard copy and a reduced copy.
So,
But basically, the changes that are promulgated in this sketch are the full circulation of the ring road for emergency vehicles.
And what color is that?
That is like a bluish,
Light blue.
I guess. And then with the emergency access,
And if I could stop you there, for the benefit of the new members, this came about based on suggestions by board members, and is that fair to say, or was there also other folks who suggested this?
the fire chief just suggested it as well.
Okay, and so what you see is the end result of United Methodist Community's compliance and agreement to add that. Is that right?
Yes. And so.
Can we, just a second, Loretta or Sandy, what exhibit number is this? So we just can reference it.
This is a new
Oh,
one.
thank you. This is from December. Is that right?
No, this is.
No, this is
Oh, this is the
new,
brand new one?
Yeah, this
Yes.
is,
dated 2/3/22.
Okay, Loretta, I'd like to thank you for mentioning that.
You
I'd like
want me
to
to
call,
mark this,
yes, please. So this
A12?
would- Yes, please.
Okay.
Just for member of the board, Loretta was given a stack of the proposed documents that we plan to present tonight. We have copies here, and maybe all of you board members have them in the normal course. Go ahead.
but the rest of the site is consistent with what we previously submitted. All the single family, we call them all the pods.
You have to speak up, Hal, we can't hear you.
Sure. All of the only thing that changed were the 3 buildings closest to the parking lot. The rest of the buildings are all in the same location, and the access is in the same location.
All right, did we agree to widen what's now the complete loop road?
Yes, it's been widened from, originally it was 12 feet, it's been widened to 20 feet
And why was that done?
to allow for the fire truck to put down the outrigging equipment. And the circular road is going to be what we call grasscrete or some pervious material. But at the suggestion of Dimitri, the last 20 or so feet for the access for the ambulance is going to be hard surface paved. And that's shown at each location for the ambulance access.
And so by agreeing to install pervious, does that reduce the overall coverage numbers?
Well, it didn't, no, because we took out 10 parking spaces. We took out the parking spaces to the northwest of the parking area.
So by reducing the parking lot by 10 spaces, that alone reduced the coverage, right?
Yes.
And if we had put in impervious, which was requested by the board, that would have increased coverage, right?
Yes.
However, we've agreed to use a pervious material, right? And is that right?
Yes,
And does that benefit percolation, which is related to coverage?
yes. The coverage has been reduced by about 0.5%. So instead of 21 point, I have the notes here. I think the original was 21.9. It's been reduced to 21.6 based on this plan.
Okay. Also, we do have Jeffrey Roche available remotely to talk about what he testified to on December 1st. And that's, of course, for the better benefit of the new board members. But since we have this up, show us what was changed dealing with landscaping on the northern boundary there.
Well, I took Jeff's concept and I added it to this presentation, but the actual details of his landscaping plan have been submitted as a separate exhibit or a separate plan. But this is conceptually what the revised landscaping includes. On the adjacent to the northwest or the north side of the property, there's a complete buffer. We've added some buffer material along Red Hill Road and Van Schoik, and there will be landscaping within the basins.
Okay, and the emergency alternate entrance, again, that was testified to as at the December hearing, correct?
Yes.
And is that what the fire chief approved as a change?
Yes, he's also a detective at the police department, and but he's run this by the people in the fire department. Things that have to be worked out logistically are the method of controlling the access to Red Hill Road, on how the fire department wants fire and ambulance want to get into the site in case the main entrance is blocked, and also the entrance and exit to the buildings, which have to be worked out, and the signage on the back side of the building and some minor lighting details.
If I could stop you there. So, Dimitri, you had asked before about how we get into the Bucko report. That was issued this week. And I'd note that what Hal's talking about right now comes from the Bucko report. So to further that, Hal, have you had a chance to look at the report? For the record, by the way, it's dated February 11, 2022. And as I recall, Mr. Flieger, we don't separately mark that for the proceeding. It's just automatic in the record. So
that's correct.
Is it safe to say that based on a forthcoming submittal that'll be ready for the March 11th hearing, that you feel that you can satisfy any of the concerns, new concerns or outstanding concerns raised by Mr. Bucko?
I believe that we can answer every question that he's raised.
Right. And I must say there are a couple of comments in Mr. Bucko's report that I think are historical, which may not be relevant anymore. But in terms of any of the substantive items, is that what you're addressing?
Yes, the lighting will be provided, will be designed in accordance with the accepted criteria for an assisted living. The some of the issues are architectural, such as how we control the access to the buildings. But effectively, virtually all the comments are addressable.
And in terms of the architectural, again, is our plan to have David Hoagland reappear. He was with us in September. Happy to say he's available to be in person if that's the desire of the board. And he will, bring the board up to speed, especially the new members. But he also will talk in detail about what the architecture looks like in terms of the one-story town center now instead of two-story, and the flipping of the wings of the two-story residential buildings. So do you want to talk?
Mr. Brown, one quick,
Yes, sir.
you just misspoke when you said they'll be ready for the March 11th hearing. The hearing date, obviously, subject to the
16th.
boards, it's gonna be the 16th, right? It's not the 11th.
Yeah,
I just, in case somebody takes away that there's a hearing on a different date, I don't want to leave that.
yeah, I'm sorry. Well, what I meant to say, if I said it incorrectly, and I probably, for the March 2nd meeting, if you have one then, that's when we would plan to have Mr. Hoagland. And I had said previously that because of the forthcoming revision of Hal's plan, I suggest that he would fit in for the second meeting in March. And if that's on the 16th, well, whenever it is, that's when we would plan to have him testify.
Excuse me, are you saying that for Mr. Bucko's letter, general comments D, that the ones I'm concerned about is item 11 through 26? You're going to comply with every one of those items and you're going to testify how in the future meeting?
Well, so, I might add, some of the things I would suggest that we disagree with.
You disagree?
Right, because like number 12, applicant shall provide emergency access to all interior buildings, such as proposed buildings 5, 6, 7, and proposed building E. We're providing the ambulance access as shown on this plan, and we're providing the fire access as shown on this plan. And the fire access obviously has been approved by the fire chief detective. And we have not gotten any feedback on the ambulance access, but I believe that conceptually it's been approved so that buildings for 5, 6, and 7, I don't understand the comment.
I think that's the one from the past. Mixed in there with some of the ones that are on the revised plan. So
yeah, that's what I was referring to, Dimitri. I thought that some of those comments really are no longer applicable. And I think that with one more session with Bob and how it could be cleaned up a little bit. For those who weren't on the board, in September, this letter from Bob's former firm was 24 pages, and I'm happy to say it's down to 7 pages now. So it's hopeful that by the next time Hal appears, it'll be even shorter. And that's when we would plan to go step by step. I was trying to generally say that we didn't want to bother the board with going through it piecemeal. We wanted to go through it one last time, and it's after Hal has a chance to submit, for example, lighting details, which we have, but they just haven't been submitted yet. So that was the intent of.
And as a couple more points, number 16, we, based on the concept of security and operations, we can't provide an entrance from the parking lot to buildings 1, 2, 14, and 15. All the visitors have to go through the town center when they check in, and they have access. You know, it's a controlled access. So the concept is not to have people entering directly into the homes. So I mean, a couple of comments like that are not attainable because we disagree with the security issues.
Well, that's up for discussion because we provided ambulance entrances for the other buildings all around the perimeter. You did a great job with that and paving it. So when we respond to an emergency in any of those 4 buildings or houses, 1, 2, 4, 15, how are we going to get into those buildings?
Well, yeah, if I could just, Mr. Carlson is sitting next to us right on the screen. And I think we were confused by the intent. We certainly can provide ambulance access. I think the perception was that it was for general access.
No.
So I think we're on the exact same page, and we can clarify that through Bob, and we can make everybody happy on that.
Yeah, and I did show an ambulance.
He didn't write emergency. It should have said emergency access.
Well, I show an access, whatever we call it, I show an access between the town center and the first the first house, the adjacent house.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, this, Hal and I have been in constant communication on the layout and the items that he's testified to tonight. My letter is strictly for the board. I actually kind of put it together for the new board members of the items that were very critical to the previous board. And Hal and I had discussed all that. And what conceptually, it appears it's going to work. But when we finally get this site laid out and acceptable, then Hal has to provide the detailed drainage study. Then he'll have to provide me again with the traffic. And so that's why my letter is structured the way it is. Just so, everybody's clear. There are some comments in there that have been repetitive, but they were still items that were of a concern to the board. And I'm just basically keeping it on the radar for the board to consider. And that's the reason for, when Hal told me he was reducing it by 10 spaces, and he explained to me, like he just did in testimony, from an engineering standpoint, I have no real concerns. But having said that, then I need to get the detailed reports and the reasons for those reductions. And he's testified that it's going to reduce the drainage. Okay, and conceptually, I agree with him, but I have to see that in a formal report again once we decide that this is the layout that is going to be the final layout.
Oh, look, I don't want to sidetrack us from where the testimony was heading, but and just tiny bit reading between the lines, and I'd rather not. I'm sensing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you intend to submit a new site plan package which contains all the details for the revised layout, which includes all of the things that have been discussed, such as the secondary access for emergency access, the change in the location of the town center, the reduction in the parking lot. All of that, of course, affects what's on the site plans and affects the stormwater calculations, which the package we got was last done in October prior to a number of these changes. Is that what your plan intent is?
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. So does that so you want to, I think, Bob, what he's saying, they want to get conceptual agreement on what we're seeing. That's not the same as approval, because that only comes after a formal vote, after we have a full set of plans in hand. But that to save effort, to make sure we have at least a common understanding of the concepts, and then they will provide the full detailed engineering.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, and that's why the letter is structured the way it is. Again, just to inform the new board members of critical issues the board had in the past, and if the board is satisfied with this concept that's being presented tonight, then yes. And again, Hal and I have had these discussions to bring it to this point. So then it would almost be like a submission of the first, like a first engineering submission of the plan. He would have to bring in all revise all of his drainage reports and lot coverages, and, you know, he has to tweak and finalize his traffic reports, his environmental reports, and all things of that nature. So we have one package to review and the board has to approve.
And for example, another thing, we have discussed that some of the pavement, especially the emergency access road, would be permeable. Other is not permeable. All of that needs to be clearly labeled. So
Correct.
the coverage, the impervious total coverage calculation can be made.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Is that?
agreed.
Okay. Mr. Brown, are we all on the same path?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you want to continue then?
Yes, sir. Okay. We'd like to shift to stormwater drainage. You're actually absolutely correct about the bottom line figures based on the acceptance of the concept, but especially since stormwater was discussed in 2021, and this is educational in part. What Hal did is that he put together a chart to emphasize data that has been submitted ever since September through probably December. With that in mind, I'd like to ask Loretta to put up on the screen what would be A13 for identification.
Which one is that?
It's
Sandy?
the details from stormwater study. Pre
The
and post
contributory
construction.
Whack Creek?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's A13 then.
All right, thank you. All right, Hal, would you describe what this is and how it relates to previous data provided to the board?
Well, let's wait till it gets put up.
Oh, yeah.
We have it here, we can put it up. This one?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, and so this would be A13 for the record. All right, Hal, go ahead.
Let me back up and say that we have a conceptual approval, a concept approval from Monmouth County, which controls the drainage system and the drainage division in their review. The county does their analysis based on a 25-year storm, but Bob is going to review a 2, 10, and 100-year storm. So what we've done is there is a significant concern about what goes to Whack-Hack Creek. And the county was also concerned about that because there's a culvert to the north of our site, which is noted as structure number H23, which goes across Van Slyke Road. And so we show, and this property drains to both Whack-Hack and Nut Swamp Brook. So the way we've designed the drainage system, we're reducing the flow, the rate based on the town ordinance. The 2-year storm has to be 50% reduction from what, the existing flow. The 10-year has to be a 25% reduction, and the 100-year storm has to be a 20% reduction. That's the column to the
Those
screen
are
right.
state numbers.
Excuse me?
Those are numbers that come from the state stormwater rules.
Right, and they've been adopted by the township in their drainage ordinance. So we show what the existing storm events for 2, 10, 25, and 100 for both Whack-Hack Creek and Nut Swamp Brook, because we did that for the county, and there are 2 different structures that they were concerned about that they don't want overflowing and flooding. So as you can see, the Whack-Hack Creek has a significant reduction in the 2, 10, and the 100-year flow. Where, as an example, we're reducing the 100-year flow to Whack-Hack Creek by about half, 47.21%, when the requirement is only 20%. And then we're also reducing the contributory to Nut Swamp Brook by between 74 and 68%. based on the existing table. Now, those numbers will be refined, and they have to be refined based on the reduced coverage and the modification, but this was based on the previous submission that we made to the county.
Yeah.
So do you think that the numbers will even look better in terms of?
I think they're going to be comparable.
Okay.
They're not going to change significantly.
Okay.
Well, I have a question about this. Is something I was looking at the October submittal, which I knew was quite right. It did indicate that the property is it's not flat. It has several different drainage areas and feeding into different locations. One thing I could not quite tell is exactly where these structures are and hence which directions they're flowing in. Just take the first one at a time. H23, you're saying that's on Van Scoik?
Yeah, that's about about 1,500 feet north of the site. That's a county culvert.
Oh, okay. And where does that lead to? That leads eventually to the Waycake Creek?
Yes.
And
That eventually leads to the north to Wackack Creek.
So
because I understand and I know that I've reviewed the Rutgers studies for the drainage to Wackack Creek, and there's a major concern about what flows into that. And as you can see, for the 2-year storm, the existing flow is 4.011 cubic feet per second, and the proposed flow for a 2-year storm is 1.383.
Okay.
So it's a significant reduction. And what we've done, some of the property, the ungraded part of the property flows the way it does now, will flow the way it does now. And we're not collecting any of the stuff that goes off site from the grassed area.
Say to the north.
To the north. So there is some areas that flow to the north because we're not, they're buffers or they're ungraded parts of the property. And that's the way, it flows now, and that's the way it'll continue to flow. But the area, but we're regrading the site and we're collecting the drainage in basins, and then we're controlling where it goes.
Okay, so the H23 site, that's just further down Van Scoik, and does that then go into Tatum Park?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, which is Middletown.
Right.
But and then it comes back into the Waycake in Holmdel.
Yes, that's my understanding. And then the other direction that some of the property flows now and some will flow in the future is to go down to Nut Swamp Brook, which I guess we call it to the east, which again is all piped and controlled by the county.
But that's again, that's in Middletown?
Yes. But you can see there's also significant reductions because the requirement is to compare the proposed flow to the existing. And obviously the existing flow is mostly, fields and grass areas. There is some paved areas on the Potter farm, but what the state and the township regulations require that you compare the existing flow to the proposed flow. And then you have to make those required reductions. But what we've designed the basins to do is to hold a lot more water.
So what you're saying is that this is being done with basins, you mean the various rain gardens?
The rain gardens and the retention basins.
So all of that leads to infiltration on the site rather than runoff leaving the site.
Well, there's both infiltration and holding it with outfall pipes. But we've controlled the size of the outfall, which thus, based on the calculations, determine the size of the basin. It's like a bathtub. If you fill the bathtub and then you limit the pipe running out of it, it fills up with water and then it drains. It drains in time.
Right. So that is the intent of the design and the requirements are to minimize, in fact, if anything, reduce the downstream impacts of the impervious coverage that you are proposing to create. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. Bob, are you content with this?
Yeah, at this point, Mr. Chairman, yes. Like I said earlier, that these, once it's agreed upon, the concept, then the revised reports with the actual engineering data will have to be submitted for review for final, my final approval.
As they say, the devil is in the details.
Correct.
So
the stormwater report was like 250 pages, so there's a lot of details.
We're going to make it 251, just to make sure that he covers all his bases.
So, Mr. Blumenthal, members of the board, you'll see now that we have put up on the screen a portion of this property. I want to clarify that we keep on talking about pasture land, but let me just confirm some of the data. So how is this an 18.55 acre site totally?
It is, yes.
And there's actually a commercial area that we're looking at. Is that fair to say?
Right. The Potters they sold lawnmowers, they sold repair mowers.
Where is that shown on that picture?
That's the building to the left.
Okay.
There was a retail store.
Right.
And as you can see, there's paved areas existing, and which we are reducing the flow, as you can see from the previous chart.
Also, we don't have to put the other picture up, it'd take too much time, but to the
Sandy,
left.
Sandy,
Yes.
do you want me to mark this, these
Yes,
two
please.
photos
Loretta,
as 814?
Yes, please. That's how it is. On that. Yeah. And
Okay.
you'll notice that there were two photos that
Yes.
were mentioned. Instead of putting up the other photo, if we look further to the left, Hal, there's another building there, right? And there's more macadam.
Yes, looking to the left is going towards the parkway.
Right. And there's another building to the left of the Potter Retail Center, right?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that the Green Acres program is 15 acres, and the remaining of the site, which is therefore about 3.5 acres, is this commercial area that we're looking at?
Right, the paved area, the existing buildings, and the farm buildings.
Right. And also, if we don't have to show it, but way off to the left, there's also a dilapidated old residential farmhouse. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and that's being removed.
Okay, very good. If there are no questions about that, we'd like to now go to new testimony.
Hold on, Sandy. Let me just see if do any board members have any other questions about the testimony that's been given just now?
I have one question, Ralph.
Go ahead.
Based on the flow numbers that you showed, I can understand the flow towards H23 structure, but to the nut swamp, are you using mechanical pumping to go on the other side? Because I can see the natural slope is towards H23. So what's that mechanism out there?
No, what it is the county required us to determine the flow to those two structures, what they call H23 and MT49A, and they're culverts that go under the road that their system dumps into. And so
are these all gravity? How?
It's all gravity.
Okay. That was my question. I didn't feel like the nut swamp was the nut swamp did not seem like gravity assessed, because I know the road is there, it's on the other side, the slope is on this side, so that's why I asked the question.
No, I apologize for making it too complicated.
No, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, then go ahead.
Okay. Shifting over to traffic, and Loretta, if you could please put up or mark what was in your chart as A14. And this is a traffic memo dated February 4, 2022. And you can verify, Loretta, you received that as part of the packet. Actually, that particular one is the next exhibit, which is A15, Loretta. If you can look at A14, the traffic memo.
Well, let's just talk.
Okay, you know what? We can skip A14. We'll just rely on.
I have that up. I have that here.
All right, actually, that one we'll get to a little later. If you could put up what is in your package as.
Because I didn't put in the map. If I put in the map.
Should be A15. We'll have Travis put it up. That'd be quicker. Okay.
Okay. I didn't mark. I hadn't pre-marked anything.
Yeah. That's right. That's how we planned it, right? Because we weren't sure. We weren't sure exactly how they're going to come in. So we'll rely on this one here, and Hal will just testify about the study. But the study we're alluding to, Hal, that we're not going to put up.
So this is A15. Excuse me, Sandy.
Yeah, that's
this
fine.
would be A15, right?
Yes,
okay.
that's correct.
Just checking. Okay.
Yeah, basically, what we did in determining the parking quantity and the shift change numbers, they were refined to actual staffing issues that will be discussed later on. But I found, and I have the pleasure of finding a New Jersey DOT 24-hour count in front of the site on Van Schoik and Red Hill Road. And so what I did is the top of the sheet plots the traffic flows by hour from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is most of the activity for the staffing. And as you can see, at 6 a.m., the traffic volumes are 1196, and it goes up in the morning to 2589. And then at the 5 to 6 period, it goes to 2848. Those are based on the New Jersey DOT counts. Our counts are a little bit higher. And then the lower part of the table shows the staffing projections of what we assumed was that the staff, when the shift change occurs, that as an example, at the 2 o'clock shift, when the shift changes its numbers, the incoming staff comes in within 15, 20 half hour before the hour, and then the later shift leaves during that. There's an overlap of shift, which occurs basically between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So those numbers show that the traffic movements based on the staffing changes peak at 1 o'clock with 22 trips. That's a combination of ingress and egress. And as you can see by the top of the table, that occurs when the traffic volumes are 1,300 less than the 5 o'clock period. So we're adding 22 trips to an existing traffic flow in front of the site of 1580. And when the traffic peaks at 5 o'clock, we're adding 9 trips when the roadway traffic is more than 2,800. So I would venture to say and suggest that 9 trips or 16 trips at the next hour compared to 2,800 or 2,200 are indiscernible. And that's just the concept of what I'm presenting. And my updated traffic report will address all that material.
All right, well, let's talk about the traffic report. When you say updated, are you talking about the one that was submitted?
Well, I mean, Bob has asked for a more detailed analysis, and also we have a concept approval from the county, and we also have a concept approval from the Turnpike Authority, which now governs the Garden State Parkway. So our analysis has been submitted to both agencies, and we have concept approval from both.
So if I could just ask Bob, would you rather have Hal submit the revision before he talks further about details?
Yeah, I would, only because, again, we looked at the, Hal's numbers and they look reasonable. However, like I said earlier, once this is finalized, I'm going to want revised reports for drainage, for traffic, for environmental, or what we're calling natural resources, as opposed to environmental.
All right, that's certainly fine, but just to go over a couple of the background pieces.
Yeah, I mean, to have this conversation and this discussion, I think is good, just to give, again, the board members a sense of what the traffic conceptually is going to do.
And can we see where visitors, how that would affect this?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
Well,
We don't have anything there on visitors, only staff.
Well, the staff, I would venture to say that the visitors are not going to occur before, we're not going to get a heavy visitor influx before 9 a.m. or during the shift change during the weekend. During the week. Most of the visitors are going to be in the evenings and on weekends when the staffing is much less. These are volumes that are attributable to the staff.
Right, and then your report, Hal, will reflect the visitors' impact.
Yes, based on the staffing requirement.
Correct.
We calculate a parking demand at the maximum shift change in the low 70 to 72 spaces. And we're providing 80, which gives us a little bit of a buffer for at the shift change at 2 o'clock during the week. And we don't expect high visitor attendance at 2 o'clock on a weekday.
Okay, Hal, let's talk about concept. So you've talked
Hold
about.
on a second, you may. Gene, did that address your question?
Yeah, I was interested in the number of visitors that would be coming in as well. I also had a question on the parking spaces. I noticed that there were 6 handicap spaces. And so I would assume that none of your staff would use the handicap spaces. So they're really, instead of 80, they would have 74 available for staff and visitors if the visitors don't need handicapped. Is that correct?
Yes, and we have more handicap spaces than are required. If the board is more comfortable, we'll take a couple of those out and convert them to conventional spaces.
Well,
there was a comment in Bob's letter about, again, I know I keep harping on the emergency part of it, of providing a space there, maybe between buildings 1 and 2 and 14 and 15 for the ambulance to be able to back up to be able to put a patient in there.
Absolutely. We'll add that to the next round. Thank you.
Right.
yeah, I mean, in terms of visitors, I suspect that's a low thing all the time. But suppose there are what I'll call events for the residents to which visitors might be also invited.
Or holidays.
Or something like that. Would that still provide adequate parking?
Well, let's take, I mean, characteristically, my experience has been at assisted living Mother's Day, which.
Good point. Good example.
And on Mother's Day, the staffing, other than the shift change, is, I mean, there's, you'll hear that from the operator, but the staffing at the maximum shift on a weekend, on a Sunday, is going to be much less. And we'll have those numbers as well.
Okay.
I just have one more question. You have accounted for visitors, traffic, but have you accounted for utilities and services, truck traffic and those kind of stuff in this?
Yeah, well, as you can see from on the site plan, there's a loading dock And all of the turning templates will be submitted in the revised plan. The previous plan used the largest truck allowed on the road, an actuated semi-tractor trailer with a 53-foot trailer. So I designed it to accommodate that truck.
How many trips a week do we anticipate?
And the anticipated volume is 2 trips a week.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, so a garbage, if a semi that has a 53-foot trailer, it's like a 62-foot long truck. If a semi can fit there, then a garbage truck or a passenger car can easily fit.
And would they be during the peak hours, or are you
No,
going to
no,
regulate them off peak?
They're going to be scheduled.
Okay.
And the other thing is, we have the template. I was given by Dave Olson the template for the fire truck, and I have that, and I've used that to plot my turning templates for the emergency vehicle.
So that's included in the revised plan, is that correct?
It's included in the original plan, and it'll be included in this revised plan.
Yeah, I'm content if we don't have every answer tonight, but as long as you know what Bob and the board is anticipating, so that when you do the resubmittal, at that time, everything can be submitted and reviewed.
Well, of course, and I'll be calling Bob often.
Fine. I'm happy to have the two of you talk. Working together is better than not.
And just to be quick about it, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and the public. Loretta, there's also a document that we provided to you on traffic analysis.
Yes, I have it.
If we could just put that up very quickly.
A16, Sandy?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go over this tomorrow with Deb.
Okay.
Can I also ask a question about parking? Because again, where the handicap spots are, I'm just looking at the map, and if you're visiting someone in house 7, is it easy to access that?
Everybody has to go through the town center.
Right.
And why is that?
Because of the control of the access. No visitors, nobody entering the site has to check in. They have to check in. It's like, as I've been advised, it's like any other assisted living where you check in to visit your family member or your friend. And in that area in front of the town center, I have a drop-off area so that the handicap would have to be a little bit removed from that.
Okay. So just by way of analogy, do you have that up? It's the chart.
Right there. Traffic memo.
That's it. It's the last sheet. So the traffic memo has been submitted, and it was up there. I just want to point out that as part of the testimony that you heard tonight, Hal did mention that he relied on a revised particular plan. That's what you see up there. We don't have to go into details now. It was prepared by the same vice president who testified last year. That's Cindy Jakes, who is here, and she can talk about that. But it seems to me, based on the revisions and the need for particularity about each category mentioned, we'll have this upgraded to include all the issues you talked about, and we'll reissue that. Okay. So that would be it, I think, Hal, unless you have something. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing. So, of course, you're talking about the increases over time, but is there a relativistic scale? In other words, was this property used before that generated traffic?
Yes, I did some quick calculations. If you take compare the Institute of Transportation Engineers.
Can't hear him.
I'm sorry. If you take the Institute of Transportation Engineers statistics, a garden center of, call it 10 acres, would generate a lot more traffic than an assisted living of 105 beds. I'll have that comparison. So that and then we did actual counts, but in 2019, but the problem was that the Potters were closing down their operation. They weren't really selling lawnmowers and having lawnmower repair. Was at the end of their operation.
But in terms of previous use, before the purchase of this property, there was use for the retail center as well as the still existing landscaping service, right?
Correct.
And also traffic sometimes to the barn building for the farm, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you have a general opinion as to whether or not prior to us purchasing it and that traffic that was generated compared to what we plan to generate, is there a relationship?
Yes, the Potter operation probably, was higher, but the reality is that we're talking about a trip generation of 22 cars during the peak hour at 2 o'clock, 1 to 2 in the afternoon, when the traffic volumes out in front of the site are 1,500. At peak hour, these traffic volumes go up to 2,848 cars. So you have an excess, during 1 hour, you have an excess of 2,800 cars passing the site. And we're going to be adding at that time about 9 cars to the traffic flow. So, I mean, the daily variation is characteristically 4 or 5%. You go out on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and here you've got almost 3,000 cars passing the site in 1 hour. No matter what you put on this site, it's going to not have it, unless you want to put something more intense, but 105 bed assisted living is going to have virtually no impact.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Simov, this is like 1/3 of 1% increase in the traffic given 3,000 and it's introducing like 10 cars.
Correct.
In the peak hour. What
Yes.
would be considered as significant impact according to the traffic studies for any given location? What percentage increase?
Well, the first thing you look at is if you change the level of service. The level of service is characteristically the average delay per vehicle going through the intersection. There's a traffic signal there's an existing signal at the driveway that we're going to avail ourselves of that for ingress and egress, and that's why we show it. We show the driveway where it is. And basically, if you're going to change the level of service, the quality of the traffic flow, then that would be an impact. But in this, 10 cars on almost 3,000 is not going to change the quality for the impact. I would say that if it goes up to a couple hundred cars an hour coming out of the site, then it might change the level of service. I haven't gone that far.
What do you mean you haven't gone there?
I haven't done a doomsday scenario as to what would overload the traffic.
But in terms of the anticipated generation of traffic projected, it's nothing close to the doomsday you're talking about.
Correct. To change the level of service, I would think that if you generate in the area of 300 or 400, 250 to 350 cars coming out during the peak hour, like a shopping center or some high intensity use, that it might change the level of service. But 10 cars or 20 cars on 3,000 is not going to change.
But regardless of the number of cars coming in and going out, the duration of the stoplight would be the same, right? It's not going to increase or decrease.
Correct. If now the traffic light is demand actuated, so if nobody comes to the Potter driveway, it doesn't go red for Red Hill Road. So, but as I said, so if we're adding 10 or 16 cars to that traffic flow, that's less than 1 per cycle. The traffic light cycles 40 times an hour.
Okay.
I think the keyword is demand actuated here. So it's
Yes,
not
it is demand actuated. It rests in the through traffic. And then when somebody shows up for the Parkway exit or the or the driveway, that's when it goes green for the side street.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, in some sense, I would be tempted to ask Hal to go through the positive, negative criteria as we generally did with Mr. Carlson and as we will with other witnesses. However, in light of the fact that we are going to refine and he'll be back again, I would suggest that we not go into that now. And we have Jeff Roche ready to testify essentially on an educational update for us. He basically concluded his testimony in December, but
Chris,
we'll bring
before we
it back.
jump ahead, let me just ask the board members if they have any questions at this time for Hal, Mr. Simoff, who's the engineer on this project.
You know, I still have a question about the parking. So
Sure.
everybody who's living at the dementia center, they are not driving at all. There's no loved ones that are capable of driving that are with them. I'm just thinking of like overnight parking and things of that matter.
That's my understanding.
I guess I used to visit good family friends at Applewood and Freehold, and parking was often an issue. You know, staff members were coming and going, and sometimes I'd circle a parking lot waiting for a spot. And, you know, I did visit someone with dementia, and they lived with their significant other who did have a vehicle. So I'm just curious to know if all of those matters are taken into consideration.
None of our residents are in.
Mr. Carlson is saying that none of the residents will be able to drive, be able to own cars. And the other point is that this parking quantity is much more than the ordinance requires. I'm not sure, but I do remember looking at the town ordinance for parking for an assisted living, and we exceed that.
With the 80?
With the 80.
So when you put in 90, that was
Yeah,
much more.
we're talking with 105 beds, we're talking about 0.8 per bed, which is a pretty high ratio.
Well, what I would add is that Mr. Bucko and Mr. Simoff, as they've been doing, they'll be talking. You know, we're offering to reduce it by 10, whatever percentage that is. If the board collectively is uncomfortable with reduction, we have no problem whatsoever. The net impact is that we reduce coverage, and we've been trying to be as sensitive as possible to that issue too. So it's a balance. Whatever the board wants in the end to make sure that everybody's comfortable.
Two things in that regard. I mean, one thing that if Bob or anyone has any real concerns about complete adequacy, one way of doing it is to banking some potential additional parking or having what I'll call an overflow lot that may not be fully paved or something of that sort, both as a compromise.
Yeah, Mr. Blumenthal, I've worked with those concepts before. Again, if the conclusion by Bob and others is that we really don't need more than 80, that's one thing. However, if there's any hesitation or there's a concern about the future, we have no problem with putting that as an aside. Green banking is what we call it, right? So
yeah.
Whatever the board wants. Okay.
Well, let me follow up one thing with another aspect of something that Jill was asking about, was on my list of questions. I guess the dominant resident is someone with dementia. However, there are situations where one person in a couple has such, and the other member of the couple might wish to live with them. How do you handle that kind of situation? Because that person might have a car and might drive.
Yeah, Mr. Bloom, but we can have Mr. Carlson come up. He's 10 feet away from here, but he's confirming, if you accept that in this particular center with the 105 residents in the residences in question, there will only be dementia patients, and there's medical reasons for that. There will be relatives who do come, and that's part of the process to care for and to visit,
but they won't
live there. You're right. The quality of life for these dementia patients will be such that
they won't be able to drive, and all of them will be in that mental state of dementia.
So in other words, if there's a couple where one is in the dementia state and one is not, then they're not eligible to stay with you.
That's correct.
I have one last question for Mr. Simoff. General question.
Sure.
What was the motivation for switching the town center to the other side, and what kind of operational difficulties did it solve that you alluded to?
That's not my decision. You'll have to ask either the architect or Larry.
So at the next meeting, we do plan to have Dave Hoagland back. He led the effort from an architectural point of view on that. If you're not completely comfortable with everything he says, we think he will. We certainly can bring back Larry Carlson. We still have Cindy Jakes that we plan to come back to talk about the reasons for that. The functionability, the fine tuning process, the operational, the functionary equivalence of what it was before we made this switch.
Okay.
I mean, I can explain, but I think you'd rather hear from an architect about how it was switched and how it functions the same.
Back to parking. I kind of agree with Jill. I have been waiting to talk about it. Based on my experience on the first aid squad going to nursing homes that we have here in town, I regularly see the lots full, and it's during weekdays. So I'd rather see the 10 spots than not see them, or like Ralph said, provisions maybe on the end where you do need to, that they could park on gravel or something like that. But I'd rather see more spaces than cutting spaces away, even if it means having a little bit more impervious coverage.
Okay, well, then the revised plan, let me propose that they be grass-free at this point, and then if necessary,
that's fine.
They can.
Let me ask Bob, are you content with the numbers where they're at, to the extent that you've reviewed them? Clearly, with the change plan, you'll look at them again.
Yeah, well, exactly. And again, Hal and I, we looked at it, and like he said that he was going to bring this concept to the board. It didn't violate the parking requirement by the ordinance. So I suggested that he bring this in front of the board for this type of discussion. To see how the board, I mean, because he complies with the ordinance. So it would be a decision. And again, I would look at all the aspects of the final submission.
So do you think that it would be appropriate to have a grasscrete overflow lot or something of that sort? Also, as a partly way of reducing some of the coverage and yet making provision so that extra space is needed if needed?
Yes, I think that's an alternative. It's and they work, but we'll have to do, if he wants to use the grasscretes, they're structurally sound for the temporary parking, that would be needed, because they don't stay all day. I mean, but
right.
I mean, we could do that. That would reduce the impervious coverage. It reduces the size of the detention basins, and it's like a little domino effect.
Yeah.
I'm
saying the word Grasscrete because it's a name I know. I know it's a brand.
Right. I mean, but we could find.
It has to be that brand.
Right. No, there's other structural products out there for parking lots that would make it, look like a grassed area, and it's still structurally sound to park cars.
Mr. Blumenthal, I just suggest that if Bob can hear more from Hal, and when he comes back, maybe Bob would have a suggestion either way. It seems like there's several alternatives. We're certainly fine with any, but from a pragmatic point of view, maybe Bob will think one is better than the other, but he doesn't have all the information right now.
No, and again, I would analyze what he's proposed, and we would run it past our traffic engineers in my office, and we'll come up with a solution.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's going to be related to the architect, but you said some revised plans are coming where 2 of the buildings will now be only 1 story instead of 2-story. What were in those when you're still going to accommodate 105 residents when there's less space? And what were those buildings for?
Yes. So that will be discussed in detail by the architect, but I can give you the answers. So the only change deals with the town center in terms of 2-story to 1-story. All of the residents will be in the same buildings that were discussed in 2021. The difference is that there's just a shift of the 2 wings that were in between the town center. So the 2-story town center is 1 story. That moves further away from the road. And then we're bringing the 2-story residences together. And there's and it's for operational efficiency. And there's an elevator bank in between them. And so that's the difference. And that the functionality and the reason for that can be described in a lot better detail than I should do by Dave Hogan, who those of you on the board heard in 2021.
Okay. And those parking spaces that we're talking about are for the staff as well. That's not for visitors.
Which
the 83 is for staff as well as visitors. We don't have a special place, right? Okay, and how many staff members would be on the property at any given time?
About well, at the shift change at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday, it's about 68. And it goes from about 40 down to 20 or so.
Yeah, I think that's just a problem to me.
I strongly think we can't always go by the guidelines, because many people have said that this is the first time this type of operation is here. So we need to go a little bit above the guidelines that everybody's referring to and put more parking in here.
If I may interrupt, the feedback that I'm getting is we're going to 90 spaces, and so we'll have like a 20 space surplus from above the shift change. And then we're gonna do some sort of pervious treatment for the last 10 spaces.
Okay.
So when we go from 80 to 90, it'll be some sort of pervious pavement or combination. I'll discuss that with Bob, and but the feeling and the feedback that I'm getting now is that we're going to go back to 90 spaces.
And I know this may not have anything to do with parking, but can you, when you redo the plans, can you number these 2 residents so the numbers are in sequence instead of having 14, 15, and 1 and 2? Can we start 1 and 2 from 14 and make it logical?
Logical.
Yeah, in other words, 14 and 15 seems out of place next to 1 and 2. It should start 1 and 2 and go around in a circle.
Right.
It'll make it easier for us in emergency services to get to these buildings.
No, I'm just being a little. It's late. I'm just being a little.
Well, I know. I was going to ask Ralph how much further are we going to go with this? 2.5 hours already.
Clock's running out. Yes. Well, I was going to see.
We have to do.
Sandy, we're done. I think, yes, we're finished with Hal. So
Yes.
what else did you want to yet do today? Because
Well, I would suggest that we have Jeff Roche on, because you can determine yourself, but my impression was that he was complete with his testimony at the December hearing. I wanted to bring him back so that he can educate and give a comfort level to all the new board members.
Okay, and he's here, he's on the screen, so
He is.
Go
Yep.
ahead, Jeff.
All right,
You
so
on your oath, and we accepted your credentials previously.
Very
Can
good.
you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Loretta?
Let me just give you those rights.
Thanks, Allison.
No problem. Okay, Mr. Rush, you should be able to share your screen.
All right, well, while Jeff is getting that up,
Hands
it-
up.
what you're showing is, would you describe what you're showing, please?
What I'm showing?
Yeah.
This is the landscape.
And was this a plan or a PowerPoint that was shown
There
before?
we go. Essentially, yes, all the slides in here were shown either back in October in the original one or in the second one.
Very good. So,
The
Mr. Chair, I
slides.
would suggest that something that was substantially similar to this was marked before. Loretta can confirm that. To the extent that there's some slight differences, if you want to have it marked differently, fine. But for right now, I'd suggest that we refer to the previously marked and now marked into evidence document, the PowerPoint from the prior presentation.
That was A3. Sandy, that was A3.
I think it was a little later. Let me just get my script here.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was A5. From
Okay,
the October 20th hearing.
very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, it's just a couple of slides. I know it's late, so I'll try to be quick. But this is the current landscape plan. And we've been through several versions of it. And it's mostly been focused on the perimeter and the views into the site, and in particular along the northern edge. Can you see my cursor going across?
Yeah.
And we were particularly concerned about the views from these existing residences up here on the northern side. And the initial proposal we made was to plant a mixture of evergreen and deciduous trees and make this whole area in here essentially like a natural woodland. But it would have been a random arrangement of things to look like a natural woodland rather than a planted area. The feedback we got, in particular from residents, was that they really did not want to look through a woodland and still see these buildings. So what we've done is to revise the buffer that we're proposing here. And you can see this very regular evergreen screen here. And the reason it's that way is so that all of these trees will grow together and become a solid evergreen screen, and you won't see through it. So this is, well, it says up here 124 new evergreens. There are 3 different species of trees. These are trees that'll grow. They're white pines, they're Norway spruce, and arborvitae. So there's some diversity to it, but it will grow together as a solid screen. So it's in 2 rows, which are 15 feet apart. And in each row, the trees are spaced 12 feet apart. So they do actually have some room to grow. It won't be like a very tight hedge like is sometimes planted. But the 2 rows will be staggered. So essentially there will be an evergreen tree every 6 feet. So very quickly, these will grow together as a pretty solid evergreen screen. And they will grow to 40 or 50 feet in height. So this will be a formidable buffer. But what we're also suggesting, you can see up here that there's a thin row of trees here, not all of them are in great shape. Those trees will all remain. But in addition to the evergreens, we're proposing another 35 trees. You can see them sort of individually. So what we're trying to do is at least make the edges of this a little bit more natural. So these will be native shade trees and flowering trees. So the residents here will not be looking entirely at just a solid evergreen hedge. And those are on both sides. Initially, along Red Hill Road, we were trying to preserve the essential sort of pastoral character of the site. So we only proposed a few trees along this edge. But there was concern also about views into the property and at the new development from Red Hill Road. So you can see here we've dramatically enhanced that. So down here we have 60 new trees. There are you can see these depressions for the drainage. So we can't just plant this whole area with trees. So that's the configuration, is to have them along the edge here. But this will be a much more natural mixture of native trees. It won't be a solid row like this here. It's not intended to, but it will be several layers of trees that will provide some screening. And in addition to that, you can see this little arrow here. We're proposing to plant another 42 trees at various places around the perimeter. So up near the buildings, in addition to the screening down here, are going to be other trees planted sort of randomly around the outside of these buildings, just to soften the appearance as you look at these buildings. It won't just be a solid wall of architecture. There will be flowering trees and shade trees along here. And 2 along the Garden State Parkway. We had some trees originally, but we have been asked to enhance that. So here we have another 72 trees that'll be planted in this parking area, partly to provide shade for the parking, but also to create a buffer along this edge. So there really is a lot of perimeter planting that's going to create a visual buffer that will really screen the views into the property from all 3 sides. And you've heard a little bit, and you saw in the video, about these neighborhoods. This is the town center. And this part of it's changed a little bit. The rendering, we haven't changed to update it to the new plan, but it's essentially like this. But you can see these neighborhoods that have been created by households. Here, 3 households up here, and then these courtyards over there. So we're also proposing, in this whole internal area, there's also a village green you see here. Another 67 trees. So altogether, this is now 400 trees that we're proposing to plant in all these different areas.
Jeff, do you remember what the original plant count was when we started this in September?
I think it was around 230.
Okay.
We haven't quite doubled it, but it's almost double what we had originally.
Okay. Loretta, members of the board, just to go over the exhibits. We've had several exhibits utilized by Jeff. You can confirm this, Jeff. So as I look at the list, A5 was an original PowerPoint that Jeff used. That was the first time he appeared, October 20th.
Right, landscape design I have here.
Yes, that's correct. There's a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Then at the November 3rd hearing, A7, there was revised buffering plan.
Right.
And then for those who were there in December, there was a final A10,
Correct.
which incorporated all the update on the landscape slides. And I believe that in essence, at least most of what Jeff is showing is what was the accumulation of all the changes to December 1st. Is that fair to say, Jeff?
Yeah.
So that's A10 then, right? Sandy?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
The last slide was actually from the December 1st presentation, and this slide was actually from the original one.
Okay, there we go. So
and this is just to give some sense. I mean, most of the focus, as I said, has been on the perimeter and the views into the site, but just to give you some sense of what we're proposing for inside the enclave. There are these 3 different residential neighborhoods. And what we want to do is to make them lushly planted outdoor spaces. We want them to be consistent from one to another, but we also want them to be somewhat distinctive so that there is, each one can be a little bit memorable in its own way. So we've given each of these courtyards a theme. And these are renderings of 2 of the 3. This is one of the courtyards is going to be all about birds and butterflies. So there will be a constant palette of plants used throughout this project. But in each of these courtyards, there will be a few species that are particular to that theme. So what we're showing over here would be a butterfly garden. So there, in this area, there would be plants that would attract butterflies, and there will be birdhouses in this area and things that relate to that same theme. Another one, this is the courtyard on the northern side, is about rock and water. So we're proposing, it's a little bit hard to see, but this dry stream bed here. Now, this won't be an actual stream, but it's going to be created mostly out of boulders and grasses and things that you might find that give the appearance of a stream bed over there. There may be a small water feature in it, but most of it is just, in fact, it's going to really function as a drainage area. Water will flow into there, and it'll infiltrate water into the ground along this way. But this courtyard is about rock and water. And then we have a third one. I don't have an image here, but that's going to be about wind and sound. So it's going to be things like wind chimes. There will be plants like native or ornamental grasses that respond to the wind. So each of these is going to have similar kinds of plants, but each one will be unique and specific so that there will be memorable features in each one that hopefully will be recognizable.
Jeff, as you testified in the beginning of your October testimony, you talked about your background. Have you had significant part in the design of elder care facilities and dementia centers?
Yes, is the short answer. You want me to list them?
No, I know the list was too long, but
well, no, but what I've said before is that my firm is an affiliate of Perkins Eastman. So we've been an affiliate of theirs since, well, for almost 20 years, 2002. And over that time, probably the last 10 or 15 years, we've worked on a number of these facilities with the senior studio of Perkins Eastman, of all different kinds, assisted living, skilled nursing facilities, and independent living. And we're actually working on, in addition to this project, we have one project that's being finished out on Long Island, which is independent living. We're working on an assisted living facility up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and this one as well. So we have 3 of them going on right now.
So based on your experiences, is there a relationship between the type of landscaping and themes and the needs of the dementia residents who will be living here?
Well, you certainly want to find plants that don't endanger them anyway. So we're careful about the selection of plants, that there aren't poisonous plants or anything that would be harmful to them. And also, and one of the reasons for the themes is to make each of these somewhat recognizable. And it's a fairly subtle sort of wayfinding tool. So each of these entrances to these courtyards, this one here is the birds and butterfly, will have elements here right at the entrance that are distinctive. So each one will have a different entry point. So there are devices like that that we would include to assist the memory. And the reason I put this one up here is there was a comment earlier in one of the, sorry about the siren if you can hear that, but about the detailed planting. And we have not done all of the detailed planting. Usually that's the last thing we do. And the reason is because it involves hundreds or perhaps thousands of plants. And if we did it early on, as these the walkways change or the building, the porches change, whatever it is, we would be constantly changing the plant layout. So we always wait until the end. But there was a comment about seeing some of the details, what we agreed to do. And this is just an image from the drawings we recently submitted. This is one of the courtyards. So it gives a sense of the kind of plant material, how it will be organized. There are shade trees, there are flowering trees, there are shrubs, and we've given a typical planting list. And the trees will probably be similar in all the courtyards, but the shrubs and the ground covers and the ornamental grasses or perennials will vary from one to the other. But this is—
Yes, if I could stop you there.
Yeah.
Just to point out, we made a transition because we talked before about the PowerPoint, and now you're transitioning over to some actual plans that were submitted for this meeting, right?
Right. But
And so Loretta,
in the
based on,
PowerPoint, in December, this plan here was actually shown.
okay,
And because we were addressing that comment then, and one of the questions from the board was, well, what about the plants? And so we included a plant schedule to show what the typical plantings, what we're proposing. So they can review it, and if they have issues with it, we can respond to it.
yeah, so the plant schedule is part of the new submission of your landscape plans, correct? And Loretta,
Yeah.
for purposes of marking, it's 5 sheets total, and I have it listed on your list as A17.
Are you talking about, let's see,
It's the second to the last on the list. It's called landscape plans.
okay.
Okay.
The clock continues to move whether we like it or not. So, and it's getting late. So I'd like to ask you to, and Mr. Roche, to wrap it up at this point in time.
This happens to be the last slide.
Okay.
And it's just a summary of what we think. They're all things that I've said. We're trying to maintain the pastoral character of the site, although we're planting quite a lot more of it than we were before, but we are adding 400 trees. The village concept, we've talked about that all night, but I think that's unique. But I think also these neighborhoods that we're designing as distinct spaces is somewhat unique too. But we're also trying to make it a safe and comfortable outdoor environment.
And I'll just ask you one question for the members who weren't there. You said before that you listened to the concerns of the neighbors. Who are you referring to in general? Were the neighbors on the northern section?
Yes, we did listen to them, but also there were people testifying at the 2 hearings. So it was, both of those things and
Yes.
comments from the board.
And I ask you that because to the extent that the folks want to focus in on the testimony from December 1st, there was testimony by 3 immediate neighbors. And just to make it quick, it's safe to say that each of those neighbors said that they approved the revisions as have been shown to you by Jeff. They also indicated that they did not feel that berms were proper. And we haven't talked about it, but they also indicated that they felt that the fence as is should stay. It is getting late. I'll cut it at this point, Mr. Blumenthal, unless you want to continue.
No, I think we need to wrap it up. There are a couple things we need to do yet.
That's fine.
And Fred, let me first ask, do any board members have questions for Mr. Roche at this point in time? I'd like to keep it short.
I have questions, but if you want, you can defer them till the next meeting.
Okay. In that case, I think we do need.
Well, just to be clear, we weren't planning to have Jeff come at the next hearing. We have other witnesses scheduled for that time.
Well,
Is it a quick question, Dimitri?
no, it's numerous questions. Number one, talk about tree removal. I noticed the trees that you're removing and the locations that they were, where they were on the plans. And I'm wondering, why do we need to take those many trees out? Some of them I agree with, but the ones I'm concerned about are the ones with the lower locations towards the front of the site, around the existing farmhouse, if you want to call it that. A few of them are being removed from that area, and I'm wondering why.
Yeah, there was that comment on the engineer's report. A couple of things. We want to preserve any trees that are worth preserving that we can. When we did the tree removal plan, we wanted to be conservative. So we didn't want to say we were keeping trees and then have to take them down. So we showed the ones that we thought would have to be taken out. The numbered trees, I forget that it's on here.
Bob identified a half a dozen.
Yep,
Yeah.
10, 9,
Right.
11, 12. I mean, I don't need to go. It's in the letter, like you
Yeah,
said.
okay.
That's
So-
my
so
first
those-
comment.
Those
That's my
trees are
first-
down.
Go ahead.
Yeah, those trees are down here. 3 of those trees you can see this one tree here is a really big black walnut that we're keeping. But because of the entry road, and now in particular, the emergency access road, several of those trees are right in this area. And some of them are actually in the road right away, but would be affected by the grading. The others are up here, where for one thing, they're up next to the house. So that's going to be demolished. And there's a question of whether they could even survive that. But this area is also being regraded. So this whole area is being filled several feet. So we thought there was no way they could stay. These along here are all trees we are keeping. And there are two others. One's right next to the house, which is in here somewhere, another one. That if you look at the table that we provided, they're in very poor condition. We wouldn't, even if we could keep them, there would be no point in keeping them. They're not worth keeping. So, but if, as we get into construction, if there are trees that we said were going to be removed, we find we don't have to, we won't remove them.
Okay, I'll accept that. The plantings, I noticed the species you're planting and the majority of them are not evergreen. So this time of year, if I'm on Red Hill Road or getting off the Parkway, those trees won't have any leaves on them. So I would like the Red Hill, let's call it that area of plantings, to have a little bit more evergreens, and not the majority of them. There's 62 white pines. I mean, with all due respects, the white pines to me are on the bottom of the list of a pine tree to have. I'd like to see some other trees like blue spruces and maybe even some more additional Norway spruces mixed in the front. And also over by building 12 or house 12 and 11, I noticed you did plant them, and I think that's a great thing, but maybe you could plant something or a few smaller caliber that are not going to grow up to be a 30-foot tree along those houses, so that it will offer additional screening. And then,
if I could intervene, because Jeff is in New York City and we're not. So Dimitri, on behalf of the homes, and Mr. Carlson is giving me instructions here, we will do that. We will put more evergreens in. We'll look more into getting rid of white pines, putting in spruce. We will talk to Bob Buckos, so he has a comfort level, and hopefully that will satisfy.
I have one more comment. Towards the rear, behind house 7 and 8, there's a gap there, and I know the grading goes down. I'm just thinking that maybe there should be something there scattered in there to just so it looks consistent rather than there being just an open space. I'm not talking about dense, just a few here and there, just so it kind of looks like it does provide some kind of shading towards.
Jeff, is it clear to you where Dimitri is talking about?
Behind buildings 7 and 8. Going where you end the rear neighbor's canopy rows and where the Red Hill Road continues, and then there's just a gap.
What was the reason for that, Jeff? I think you alluded to that before. It was a topographical issue, but Jeff, can you clarify that? Expand on it?
Are you talking about along Van Soik Road?
Yeah,
Or,
you know, there's
if you want to call it
there.
that, yes.
Yeah.
Well, as we've said from the beginning, where we could, we've been trying to maintain, you know, if you look out there now, there are not very many trees. There are these few down in the corner, but out in the middle of the site, there are only a cluster of trees here and there. So where we could, and where we weren't concerned about screening, we were trying to maintain the meadow and the pastoral character. So where we haven't planted trees is because we're trying to do that.
Well, with all due respects, this pastoral look is gone forever if we have this there. So if we can change the way it's going to look and make the buildings less obvious for all the people that are going to be driving on Red Hill Road, that to me would be my goal.
I disagree with you, Dimitri. I think you've gone a little bit overboard in that regard. And I think a compromise of maintaining some of the pastoral look is very appropriate.
I mean, up here, this is these buildings are now like 400 feet or so away from the road at that point, which is why we thought that would be, and there are trees around these buildings up here.
Yeah.
So might you see a glimpse of a building perhaps, but it's pretty far away. And what we wanted to try to do is keep that open meadow in this whole part of the site here that's not being disturbed.
Okay, I think it's 10 o'clock. We need to wrap up. Do any other board member have any questions for Mr. Roche? Seeing none. We have two other things to deal with yet. I think given we've had a lot of testimony, we ought to at least accept some public questions on the testimony that's been given tonight. Questions only, not comments. And then we need to discuss briefly our schedule going forward. So if the board is in agreement, I would like to open the floor for a few brief questions from members of the public on the testimony given this evening. If you are, if you're a member of the public and you would like to speak or ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature, raise your hand, and we will try to recognize you and get you on so that you can speak. I see 3 different people with their hands raised. So then let me reiterate, please, each of you, and as you're recognized.
Excuse me, Ralph.
Yep.
They're represented by an attorney. The attorney can speak on their behalf.
Yes, yeah. If you are represented by one of the attorneys that are here, you cannot speak separately. You have to have your attorney speak for you. And with that, let me just please reiterate again, questions on tonight's testimony only, and please state your name and address for the record. We'll start with the first person I see is Angela. Angela, can you speak?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Angela Curcio. I live at 3 Williams Way. So I wanted to address the questions that I have was, I heard Mr. Brown, he was mentioning a lot about, he had preferenced the testimonies with that we need to look at the evidence. And I was a little concerned that the testimonies didn't have evidence regarding the visitors. It was a lot of the assumptions on how many visitors there was going to be. And also he was in comparison, he was doing a garden center comparison to compare to what Potter's Farm, the traffic that Potter's Farm currently has. So I wanted to, my main question is if we have any evidence to back up where he's getting this comparison from, because I'm sure Holmdel residents know comparison from Potter's Farm to Casola Farms are 2 very different garden centers here. And I was also concerned with, he had mentioned that coming up with an overload, when asked what would be considered an overload of traffic, he had said that he hadn't done that doomsday comparison yet. And to me, I don't know how he is telling us there's not an overload of traffic when he mentioned that he didn't do the calculation to figure out there was a comparison. So my question is, can he get that evidence to us? I know, Mr. Blumenthal, you had said you were content that he was going to get it to us in the future, but I live less than a mile from this, so this is going to affect me every day. And I know he only was mentioning these brief hours, these heightened traffic hours, this 9 to 10 o'clock and then 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's not gonna work for me. I'm driving here. I'm trying to get out of the streets right across from off of Van Schoik throughout the entire day, not just 9 o'clock. We already have an increase of traffic and it's hard to get out. I don't know if any of you have tried to get out of those streets.
Okay. Well, just taking questions only now. So you want to have Hal respond to that at all at this
Yeah,
time?
just to be clear, I think our friend resident is talking about me, but it's all related to, I think, Hal Simoff's study, and here he talked about forthcoming information, but I'll let Hal talk.
Yeah, I will figure or calculate what the driveway can handle and reach level of surface F. But I might I might add that when we peak when this use peaks during the week, our numbers are the roadway numbers are more than 1,000 less out in front of the site. So, it's not just, if you looked at the presentation that I made, it was all the shift changes from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. Then after that, after 6 p.m., there's no shift change until the next morning at 6 a.m. So I talked about the shift changes during the week. Shift changes on weekends are much less, number one, and number two, that's when the visitors would max out. And we'll have those
Correct.
numbers on the visitors.
My question was more so, I know you were focused on those hours, but my question was, how come a study hasn't been done to see how it was going to affect us in all the hours? And we're only looking at the staffing, yet what about the visitors? We haven't had any information relating to those visitors.
Well,
And I'm worried about the traffic in that area, because I urge you to look at the accident record in that area for both Holmdel and Middletown reports.
Okay, well, I'll discuss it with the client and get some projections as to what their expected visitor intensity is based on their other sites that they operate. And on the accidents, I'll do an accident analysis.
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you, Hal. Let me go on to the next person then. Peter Chalik, I have it right. Please identify yourself for the record.
Hello, I'm Peter Chalik. My family owns the property on 2 Fox Hunt Road on the corner of Fox Hunt and Van Schoik. And I looked at a site plan that was online with the zoning board, and it looks that there's a proposed sanitary force main that's going to land directly in front of our home. There hasn't been any talk about this, but it's something that was of grave concern to my family because we've owned this property for 50 years. We lost property when Van Schoik was widened, and we're finally in the process of selling our house. We don't know what that's going to look like. Is that going to affect our property quality of life because these pumps have a methane gas that is released? They make noise. So I don't know the answers, but I would really appreciate somebody being able to enlighten me, because we are in the process of finally selling our home. And if it is something that's detrimental to us, you can imagine how that's going to affect the property value of our home and also any potential buyers. So I look to you guys to give me some answers on that if possible.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. For those of you who were at the December hearing, we did talk about that in general, and I'll just give a quick summary of that. If you want more information offline, after that, you can contact my office, or we can give you another representative if you want.
Yes.
More information. My name and number is in the book, or we can give you others. You can ask even Loretta and she'll give it to you. Having said that, what we said in December is this, that the line that will run from our facility down Van Schoik is approximately 3,500 linear feet, and it ties into an existing trunk line that's in Van Schoik. There will be no pumping stations at all on that route. The only pumping station will be on site, and it will be subterranean. You won't be able to see it. The approval for the details of that is subject of a as we call it, condition subsequent. It's a collateral approval. It is by the township. They will monitor the details of that. But we have represented that we have no plans to put a pumping station anywhere along that route.
I was given some conflicting information, but I wasn't able to get an answer of that. And that certainly is a better opportunity if this is something that's approved that doesn't affect us. That's a good neighbor scenario, because the other one would have really been terrible. Okay,
Thank
Yes.
you for the question.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you
Glad
very
to
much.
answer that.
I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you.
The next, Bob Gata, the next, Bob Gata, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Whoops, okay. Bob Gata, unmute yourself and please identify yourself for the record.
Hi, I'm Bob Gata, 9 Fieldgate Court, Holmdel. Are the patients that will live in this place have been medically certified to have dementia? Part one of my question. Part two of my question is, as I think you know, dementia gets worse and worse. I've lived through this with my parent. Eventually, they get to a point where their control, self-control, etc., diminishes greatly. What will you do with those people? That's my two questions.
Sure. If I can call you Bob, you can call me Sandy. We did have testimony about that during 2021. But to reemphasize it, we don't have time tonight, obviously, but Cindy Jakes will address that. And the basic answer is that, as we indicated even tonight, all these residents, as we call them, they will have certain degrees of dementia. And there are certain situations that don't deal with dementia, but they might deal with other medical modalities where they might have to transfer out. Again, I can go on and on about it rather than reading transcripts from 2021. Cindy will be back and be ready for March 2nd.
All right, you answered part two very nicely, but you didn't answer, will the, upon entrance, have been medically certified to have dementia?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the question. Going on, next is, I guess, Stephen Growalski, if I have it right.
Yeah,
Please,
good enough.
question, please try to limit your question to a testimony that was given tonight. Please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, my name's Stephen Growalski. I live at 3 Country View Road in Holmdel. I just wanted to let the zoning board know that I am a member of the Country Woods HOA, and that Kevin Asadi, you know, the lawyers involved in this do not represent me or the HOA. So I just wanted to make sure that the zoning board knew that.
Okay. Next. Jane Sizik. Please identify yourself for the record and ask questions related only to tonight's testimony.
Yes, my name is Jane Zisk. My address is 6 Lucarelli Drive. My question actually regards the impartiality of Mr. Blumenthal regarding this entire process.
That's not appropriate question at this time. It does not relate to any of the testimony given this time.
I do believe that it's an overarching concern of this entire process, and I would like to read a statement into the record.
It's really not subject of what your
Yeah, I'll cut you off,
question
Sandy.
was.
You can read any statement at the end of the process. That's how the process works for the zoning board. So unless you have a question of the witnesses tonight, all comments can be made under oath at the end of the hearing, but not tonight.
Okay, the next, get to leave one more, Eric Silvergold.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Art.
Okay, great. So my name is Eric Silvergold. My address is 9 Powderhorn Court, where I've lived for 22 years, and my home is approximately 235 feet from the proposed facility. I'm also a member of the Country Woods Homeowners Association, and I would like to strongly state that the so-called preservation of Potter's Farm nonprofit has nothing to do with me, and their attorney who is present tonight does not represent me in any way, shape, or form. So question, as we've previously discussed, the residents of Country Woods have significant concerns about opening up Country View Road. And I just want to again reiterate with UMC and with the zoning board that UMC will agree to a permanent deed restriction stating that Country View Road be permanently sealed off from the enclave as a specific condition of approval to the application.
That was not a discussion tonight and has been previously agreed to.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if I remember correctly, it was talked about tonight. Am I incorrect?
It came up as a side note. That's true, Ralph. It did go over the side note. Mr. Brown wants to just reiterate it for the record, and we'll put it to rest again, hopefully.
You're absolutely correct, Eric.
Okay. Thank you. Last person for tonight, Mr. Terrence Wall. What is your question about tonight's testimony, Terrence?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Terrence Wall, 170 La Quinta Court, Holmdel. One brief question on the ingress egress, which I think is germane to the testimony. Am I correct?
Well, go ahead with the question.
Okay, so that's a yes. Thank you. From a first aid, police, fire perspective, is it realistic to and if you have, that I just want to make sure it's clear on the record, that you're deed restricting the end of Country View Road and that it is not intended to be an additional ingress and egress in the event that the one ingress and egress that you have currently is blocked with an MVA or other obstacle that first aid and or fire equipment have an additional route. For example, a pervious paver, like a grass paver program, to be able to get in as an emergency route. Are you also stating as part of your deed restriction that you're not going to have that as an additional route for first aid, fire, police vehicles in the event the front area is blocked?
The yes and no answer is yes. As Hal alluded to, the fire chief has signed off on the alternate entrance, which is off of Red Hill there. That was testified to at the December hearing. We responded to prior concerns by the board, and I would suggest it was based on fire and ambulance, to have an alternate access. And we did that. And we have no plans, and we don't think it's necessary to even consider Country View. And we understand how the residents are concerned about that. And we're being good neighbors, and we're happy to make them comfortable. We don't need that. We don't think that anybody in the township should demand that. And hopefully that resolves it.
And the police, you had mentioned fire and first aid. The police have also signed off on that being sealed off and not being a secondary ingress egress for emergency services.
Well, I read the specific verbiage of the detective who was also the fire chief, right, Hal?
Yes.
And so I'll let that speak for itself. He doesn't particularly talk about the blocking off of Country View, but he doesn't have to. He said that the alternate plan, and we can recommend, the alternate plan we submitted was for, as we said, and as was shown tonight, off of Red Hill. So, yeah, I mean, the document speaks for itself, but that's the intent.
Thank you. And you testified today, I think it was, there are 105 units, I believe, and there were 85 parking spots now. Did that change? I'm sorry, just one.
There are 105 beds. So that's residents, it's not units. And then.
Right. I'm sorry. Correct. Right.
And we're proposing 80 parking spaces with a bonus of 3 more, but physically there'll be 80 we're proposing 80. And after tonight's discussion, I think we're going to increase it to 90 as an overflow area. The extra 10 is an overflow area.
And tonight you testified that the approximate full-time staff daily there is how many?
The maximum occupancy is about 47.
Is that FT? 47 full-time employees?
Yes.
All right. So that would be 47 spots, I would assume.
No, I'm sorry, 68.
68. So
at
68.
the 2 o'clock shift change, there'll be 68 employees.
on site. Some of those are
And-
leaving and some of them are entering.
I should
Okay.
just add that, as I indicated before, that chart was generated by Cindy Jakes. She will be here and she can certainly, talk more about the actual programming, the number of folks, and maybe your questions can be more firmly answered at the next hearing when she testifies.
Well, I don't want to share my opinion. I'm trying to get to what formula you're using for a traffic impact study to arrive at that level of parking spaces for 105 residents and that level of full-time employees at the 2-hour shift. And I'm trying to understand. Did you testify to the average? Is there a national standard on typical guest and visitor time with whether it's family or other care providers as to whether or not you're maxed out and to whether or not you're going to need supplemental parking somewhere else off-site?
On the trip generation, the volume entering and exiting the site, my original report analyzed I used what's called the Institute of Transportation Engineers statistics, but then this has been refined by the actual shift change numbers. The ITE numbers are a little bit less than what we project for the shift change, but they're in a comparable number.
I think that's it for tonight. So thank you, Terrence.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to quickly let you know, Mr. Silvergold said in the chat that he had another question.
Well,
I don't know if
at this hour, I think he's had one chance, and so we'll have to limit that for now. There'll be other opportunities at another hearing. Okay, so we've reached I hope, the near end of tonight. Going forward, I believe you have additional testimony to provide. You've also indicated that you will be making a new submittal of the entire site plan package for review by the professionals and everyone. They'll be provided to them. And only question in my mind is, when might you anticipate the resubmittal? You need to leave time for the professionals to review that. And or is there other testimony that can be done before that is in hand?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Blumenthal. So for March 2nd, we plan to have testimony by Dave Hogan. We will be submitting a revised package before the end of this week on that. Our point of view is that these revisions, which are almost complete, if not complete, will satisfy any concerns on architecture. And he'll talk about the history of it again. He could talk a bit about what he said in 2021, blending in with the newest. Also, Cindy Jakes will be available.
One of them.
And we also have some other witnesses to fill in any time that you might permit us. So for March 16th, that would be our planned date to have Hal come back with all the items he talked about. We understand it'll be done for submittal by the 10-day rule. As you heard, Hal will be talking to Bob Bucko on a regular basis to make sure he's up to speed. And we expect that he'll be able to finish his testimony on the 16th, if that is the date that you have your next hearing after the 2nd.
How about, I anticipate you'll have some testimony from a planner about the variance?
Yes. After what I just mentioned, Jim Higgins will be available to testify. He is available on March 16th to be in person or otherwise.
Okay, so you're anticipating.
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask a question to clarify?
Sure.
So is because I know that Mr. Brown just mentioned that the plans would be in 10 days before the hearing, which I know is the standard, but I would like to do, especially before planning testimony comes on, I would like to make sure that I have time to do a new review letter.
Let me just ask, Sandy, clarify. Are you talking one submittal or two?
Well,
what you're talking about submitting this week, is that the full engineering package, or is that
No.
later?
Right.
No. I mentioned Dave Hogan will be here on March 2nd, and he will testify based on some revisions that will amplify on what Hal talked about tonight. But Hal will not be here on March 2nd or before you in person. He will be before you, if permitted, on March 16th, and we will plan to get any of his revised plans in, in full compliance with the rules. And based on Kate's concern, maybe Jim Higgins and/or Hal can reach out to Kate to make sure she has a comfort level.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, Sandy, does Hal intend on having his drainage, his revised plans, his sanitary, all of that submitted 10 days before?
Not the sanitary, Hal points out. I should mention a thought that we've had. We have always asked from the beginning for not only the use variance and the grant of the subsuming of any C variance, and if there's a design waiver, in conjunction with preliminary and final site plan. And I'm not talking about bifurcation of use from site plan. What I'm thinking about is if the board and the professionals all feel that we've satisfied the concerns based on what would be under your ordinance, the preliminary, that, final details might be considered later on. I know that on my boards, I've done that on a regular basis, as long as the professionals have a comfort level on whatever has to be submitted to make a full comfort level decision by the professional. That's what I'm thinking about. I would suggest that Bob and Hal can talk more about it, and Jim Higgins can talk more with Kate to see if that's the direction that you might want to go with, so that we could, really finalize what's now been almost 6 months of testimony without necessarily providing every last detail that wouldn't be necessary for preliminary.
So just 10 days ahead of the 16th would be prior to the 6th. You would have the full engineering package resubmitted.
Right.
And on the 2nd, the testimony would be based on the concepts, not the detailed engineering.
Well, again, Hal's not planning to come back on the 2nd because he's basically finished everything that would relate to what he's done so far. He would come back on the 16th after he, satisfies all the rest of the concerns in Bob Bucko's list, and also updates based on what we heard tonight. But Dave Hoagland could testify probably the final time on the 2nd, based on the educational process that you heard tonight about architecture, coupled with any other fine tuning based on the shifting of the structures and the reduction of the town center from 2 stories to 1 story.
Kate, is that okay with you, that schedule?
I think so. I mean, I'm just trying to think about, because generally a planner will go last after these things have been hashed out, and that's the case even if it is something, even if it were to be a choice. That's what happens in bifurcated applications. That's what happens in preliminary applications. And I just want to be sure that, I think it sounds okay. And, I'm just thinking back over all the information we heard tonight, just things like the parking. But I would also agree that a lot of the issues that have come up over time have been, addressed, even if they're not in their final form, and to the point where we know what we're going to see. Yeah, I just want to make sure that, I want to make sure that, I have time to put out a letter that's like accurate for when the planner comes up, and I'm happy to talk to Jim. But yeah, I think that's fine with me, as long as if Bob's comfortable with the engineering side of it, then that's what matters here as well.
Right, and that's what concerns me, is I don't want to be, I guess, rushed into a review. I would like a little more time, but I mean, this is a very complicated and a very detailed review. It's not something that, you know, you just can get through very quickly. There's several disciplines, again, traffic, stormwater, lighting, landscaping, environmental with the wetlands and things of that nature. And I'd like to have adequate time to have my staff who does these reviews adequate time. And I think 10 working days is really pushing it. And I understand, Sandy, your concern of getting this through as quickly as possible, but you know, I would like to have a little more time, if that's possible. If not, then I'll have to see what we can do to make it. I mean, you know,
what I would suggest, Mr. Blumenthal, is that we want to set March 2nd right now. Maybe it's too far ahead to put the 16th in concrete or granite, so to speak. So I would suggest that we set the 2nd, and on the 2nd, we decide if we go on the 16th. In the interim, again, Bob can talk to Hal, and Kate can talk to Jim and see if there's this comfort level. Again, I understand what Bob's saying. You know, as an advocate, I have to say, well, we've been going back and forth with this for 6 months, but I understand what Bob's saying, and we want to work with you, obviously. But if that's comfortable for everybody, that's how I think we should proceed, step by step.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think Bob and Kate both expressed their concern that this is a complex application. If they get a full resubmitted package, it's going to take some time for everybody to look through the whole thing. So the sooner we get it, the better. And if you have testimony you can do on the 2nd, we have time on the 2nd, then we can reassess on the 2nd.
Ralph, I think we should just skip the 16th and allow us to see some backyard variances. I don't know if Loretta has anything, but when are we supposed to see backyard variance? In May?
Oh, the last I heard from her, talked to Loretta about that, the 16th was being held for this application at the moment. We had some potential backyards for the 2nd that they have not yet materialized. So she was at this point potentially having backyards in April. Loretta, you want to comment? I don't know how far you are along with any of the April ones.
I have a couple of pending applications. Nothing's been scheduled. So right now, everything is open. I can do any of the dates, March 2nd for the Dementia Center, March 16th, April 6th.
So none of the pending applications have reached anywhere near a complete in the state yet.
That's correct.
So we can't fully commit. So I think
we can do March 2nd for further testimony, and then take it from there for either March 16th or April 6th.
Yeah, but I think if we have some neighbors, residents that need to come in, that we kind of put them in on the 16th, and then we just skip and give them more time to get everything for our professionals.
Okay, so what is it you're suggesting then, Dimitri?
I'm suggesting we'll do the 2nd, but tentatively skip the 16th and go to the next meeting. And this way you have some spots to put our local backyard variance for our residents that might need pools and things for the summertime.
Well,
but there's no request, there's no applications available at this time. You know, why can't you decide this on March 2nd? Maybe it fits in.
We'll see. Exactly. I think so. The key is, I think, to continue to March 2nd.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. What I want to also ask is, will we be in person on March 2nd or via Zoom?
I think
in person.
I think the Zoom has worked quite well. And for other applications, if we didn't do it previously on this application, I think it worked fine tonight. We did have a bunch of people listening in, probably more than we can fit in the town meeting room. We were able to accommodate a number of participant questions. So let me just, well, first of all, with the applicant, Sandy, are you folks content with continuing on Zoom?
We're willing to continue on Zoom if that's the consensus of the board. I do understand that some folks feel that the in-person presentations have a better quality to it, but whatever the board thinks is the best way to go.
I mean, clearly the health situation, which to me comes first, happily is getting better, but whether it'll continue that way or what, we don't know. I'd be quite comfortable with staying on Zoom, but let me just ask the other board members. I know I don't have to ask Dimitri. I know Dimitri prefers to be in person. Is that correct?
That's correct, for this, especially for this type of an application and for this amount of residents that want to take part in it.
Irfan?
Where is it?
What?
I was on mute. I'm comfortable with Zoom. I don't think it matters anyway to me.
Okay, Jane?
To me, well, it doesn't matter so much to me. It could be either way.
Jason, I know for March 2nd, you're going to say Zoom.
Yeah, no, I have a family trip of my away from here, so I could only do it on Zoom on March 2nd. I have no issues with Zoom. I think this worked out really well. So I would vote for Zoom on March 2nd at least.
Jill?
It doesn't matter to me. Either works.
Francine?
Well, I think in-persons are better, but for my personal reasons, I won't be able to attend on March 2nd unless it is a Zoom meeting. I'll be in Florida.
Okay, so we have two saying that unless it's Zoom, they can't do it, and then that would impact our numbers, and that's not good. So I think the consensus seems to be that most are content with continuing on Zoom, and if that's better for a couple of people, for sure, I'm certainly comfortable with that. The applicants are okay with it. Let's do March 2nd on Zoom. So to reiterate, this hearing will be continued without further notice to the public to continue at 7 p.m. on March the 2nd, and will again be via Zoom. Loretta will be putting out the notice with the appropriate Zoom link for that evening.
So Ralph, it will be carried without further notice, correct?
Yes. And I don't know if you need an extension from Sandy.
Yes, I'll send it to Sandy. I think I had it through the end of March.
You do. I'll sign whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay. Marty, is that all okay with you?
Yeah, we're good, but Loretta, just clarify, you put the Zoom link on the website, right? There'll be no notice.
On the agenda and posted on the website, correct?
There you go. So that's how you'll find the Zoom link.
Correct.
And the agenda is also will be on the township website.
Right.
Right.
So in that case, finally, thank you all this has been a lengthy session, longer than we knew really cared to go. We've covered a fair amount of territory and more to go. And is there any other business for this evening?
No.
Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second?
I second.
Gene and
All
Jane.
in favor?
Yep.
All right. Thank you all, and to continue on March 2nd, thank you and stay safe and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everyone.